I've been on night shift long enough to know that the quietest nights are the ones that can get under your skin. That Tuesday, it was unusually still. The station felt empty. The kind of empty that presses against your ears until you swear you hear your own heartbeat echoing in the hallways. I was alone, parked at my cruiser, sipping lukewarm coffee, waiting for the hours to pass when the radio crackled. At first, I ignored it. Static pops happened. Old equipment. Too many channels overlapping. A deer running through the fields on the edge of town. But then I heard a voice. Faint, weak, like it was coming from the other side of a canyon. Unit 44, do you copy? I froze. Unit 44. That wasn't a unit on any current roster. Not in this county. Not anywhere close. I checked my notes, flipped through the dispatch logs on my tablet. Nothing. No record of Unit 44. Ever. Unit 44, do you read me? The voice repeated. Just barely above static, but distinct enough to make my skin crawl. I leaned closer to radio, turning the squelch down until I could make out words more clearly. The voice was young, professional, like a rookie trying to make his rounds. Calm, measured, but there was an undercurrent of urgency, subtle, but there. Something about it didn't sit right. Unit 44, report status. Over. I reached for the mic. This is Unit 8. Who is this? Over. No answer. Just static. But the voice came back after a moment. Clearer now. Almost as if it had been waiting for me to speak. Copy Unit 8. Over. Area quiet. Too quiet. My stomach tightened. Quiet nights weren't unusual. But the way he said it, like he expected something to happen any second. My eyes flicked to the tree line outside the station. The wind was calm. No animals. No lights flickering. Just the stillness. Unit 44, what is your location? Over. My voice trembled slightly, and I hated that. The mic felt heavier in my hands than it should. There was a pause, long enough to make my chest ache. And then, Route 7, mile marker 12, northbound. I frowned. Route 7. I knew the stretch. I'd patrolled it 1,000 times. But mile marker 12, the last marker before the Old Creek Bridge, that place hasn't been maintained in decades. We only drive by if there's a report. And there hasn't been a report in years. My fingers tightened around the mic. Unit 44, are you alone? Over. No, not alone. Seeing shadows not moving right. Over. I swallowed hard. Shadows not moving right. It sounded absurd. A deer? Maybe an animal caught in the headlights? Maybe. But the voice was tense, afraid, whispering the words like he wants someone or something to hear him. Static filled the channel. Then I heard it again. Soft, distant footsteps. Not my own. Not a car. Footsteps crunching over gravel. Slow, deliberate. My pulse spiked. I leaned closer to the speaker. Unit 44, what do you mean, not moving right? Identify yourself. Silence. And then, barely audible, they're watching. My hand shook. I gripped the steering wheel, eyes scanning the lot outside. Nothing. Just a faint outline of the trees against the dim glow of the streetlights. The wind rustled a branch. A cat yowled somewhere in the distance. But no one was there. Unit 44, repeat your last. Over. Static. Then they don't move like us. Over. I pressed the mic again. Unit 44, what does that mean? Over. No answer. Only the faint hum of static. Like a voice trying to breathe through a thick wall. I knew enough about radio transmissions to know what I was hearing didn't make sense. Unit 44 was dead, or at least should have been. The files on him were sparse. A name and a roster that had been removed years ago. Lost in a fog of procedural errors and missing logs. But somehow, he was talking to me. Unit 44, you copy? I asked again. My voice sounded small in the night, swallowed by the quiet. I can't leave, over. My stomach churned. That wasn't a normal response. That was fear. Pure, unfiltered, human fear. Coming through an old radio in a quiet county parking lot. I glanced around the station. No one was there. I was alone. Just me, the hum of fluorescent lights, and this voice from a past that shouldn't exist. They're everywhere, The voice whispered, closer now, as if leaning into Mike, urgent and pleading. I felt sweat run down my back. I gripped the wheel, knuckles white. Unit 44. What do you mean everywhere? Identify them. Over. Static. Then over. I switched the radio to a nearby frequency. Maybe it was interference. Maybe someone was messing with the old channels. But the next words froze me solid. Unit 8, you hear too? I swallowed. My mouth was dry. My hands shook. What do you mean? Over. Same shift, same time. The hairs on my neck stood straight up. I knew what he was saying. Somehow, the ghost of his patrol, his last moments, was overlapping with mine. The same empty streets, the same quiet, the same slow crawl of night pressing in. They're learning, the voice whispered. Waiting. The radio crackled violently. Static. White noise. I slammed my hands on Mike. Unit 44. What's happening? Over. And then nothing. Silence. Just the hum of the idle radio. The lights of the station buzzing softly. No footsteps. No shadows. No voice. I sat there, frozen, staring at the radio. The air felt heavier. The quiet pressed against me, like it was alive. I wanted to laugh at myself. Tell myself it was a prank, a technical glitch, something rational. But I couldn't. I knew deep down that the voice had been real. Not in the room, not in the flesh, but real. Fear real. Presence real. Something there. Waiting. Watching. Patient. I left the radio on. I didn't touch it for the rest of my shift. I couldn't. I kept glancing at it, half expecting the voice to return, half expecting it to identify me next. Unit 44. Gone years ago. Speaking from the beyond, it seemed, warning me, or maybe marking me. By the time morning came, the sun was a thin line on the horizon. The air felt lighter. Normal. But I couldn't shake it. That voice, that presence was inside my head now, echoing, waiting for the next shift, waiting for nightfall. And I knew, the next time I turned on that radio, it would be back. I didn't sleep much after that night. Not because of the radio itself. It was off, quiet, ordinary. But because of the voice. Unit 44. Gone for years. Yet somehow, there it was, whispering through the static, carrying pieces of life that should have ended long before I was on shift. I tried to convince myself it was just interference, some old frequency overlapping, maybe a prank. But when I arrived at the station the next evening, the same uneasy pressure had settled into the corners of the room. The hum of the lights felt heavier. The coffee tasted bitter, metallic, like it had absorbed the weight of the night before. And then it started again. Unit 8, can you hear me? Over. I froze. My hand went to the mic instinctively. This time, the voice was clearer, stronger, as if it had grown accustomed to me. I didn't respond at first. I just listened. Southbound, near the old mill, lights flickering on the ridge. Scene 3? No. For moving against the road, silent, over. I shivered. Every word was precise, professional. Not a civilian's report. A patrol log spoken aloud, recorded live, except it wasn't. The places he described weren't just real, they were familiar. The road near the mill, the ridge, the way the trees cut shadows across the asphalt. I knew these places. I had driven them myself, countless times. Approach cautiously, equipment failing, backup delayed, over. He spoke of malfunctions that made no sense. Radios cutting out, headlights flickering, but in the voice it felt real, immediate, urgent, and beneath it, fear. I could hear it, barely, like a tremor beneath the words. I set the radio down for a moment, rubbing my face. This isn't happening, I whispered to myself. But it was. And the more I tried to rationalize it, the more certain I became that this voice was not just a recording. He was alive in some form, replaying the last patrol he ever lived. Traffic stopped, cars abandoned, figures standing at the roadside, watching over. I swallowed hard. I knew the stretch of road he was talking about. I'd driven it in daylight, night, fog, rain. Never saw anyone. Never had. And yet, the detail was enough to make my heart hammer. He knew it. He had seen it. Or he had. Left turn at the creek bridge, fallen tree, Something moving under it. Silent. Over. I leaned closer to the speaker. Unit 44. Who's with you? Over. There was a pause. Static swirling like wind in a tunnel. And then, no one, not anyone you know. Over. Not anyone I knew. The word sank deep. There was a presence out there. Something watching. He had felt it. He had recorded it. And now, through me, I was hearing it. We moved cautiously, footsteps echoing. Never our own, never moving right. Over. I pulled my chair closer to the radio. My eyes traced the room. The empty desks. The flickering fluorescent lights. The shadows press against the walls. Elongated. Bending. It was impossible, and yet my brain insisted on seeing it. The voice spoke a fear so pure, it was almost tangible, almost touchable. The first one followed, and the second, we lost a third. Over. He stammered now. Human, real, terrified. The calm professionalism had cracked, revealing panic. And I felt it through the static, like an electric current running through the air. Lights fading, cannot see, cannot stop. Over. I gripped the edge of the desk. My knuckles ached. My ears strained. I wanted to speak, to demand explanation. But how do you question someone who shouldn't exist? How do you question a voice from a past that no one remembers? Overpass near mile marker 9. Saw what we shouldn't. Over. He whispered it low, trembling. And in that pause, the room seemed to lean in with me, listening. My own breath echoed too loudly. Something was there. Something had always been there. And Unit 44 had seen it first. The air, heavy, not wind, not storm day. Over. I couldn't take it anymore. I picked up the mic. Unit 44, what did you see? Over. Static, long, hollow, filling the room. Then a faint, trembling sigh. Cannot explain, cannot name. Over. I pressed my lips to the mic. Where are you now? Over. Where you are? Same. Over. The words froze me. My pulse slammed against my ribs. My station, my desk, my empty night shift office. He was there, or something was. Something that had been following him, and now he was telling me, do not look behind. Over. I obeyed instinctively, though my body trembled. Slowly I turned my head. Nothing. The room was empty. Only the hum of fluorescent lights, the faint tap of the air conditioning, and the radio's soft static. I could not move, they watching, waiting. Over. And then, almost like a whisper into my own mind, Unit 8, you're next. I slammed the radio off. My hand shook violently. My chest burned. I felt like I had inhaled ice. The silence pressed in, heavier than any presence outside could. I tried to laugh it off. Told myself it was a trick of interference, a memory, a glitch, something in my own mind playing games. But the truth is, I couldn't. Everything he described, the abandoned cars, the lights on the ridge, the creek bridge, the silent footsteps, I knew those places. I had driven past them on patrol, sometimes late at night, sometimes alone. And now, hearing him recounted in such detail, I understood. It wasn't just a memory he was sharing. It was a warning. Cannot leave, cannot stop. Over. The repetition gnawed at me. The cadence of fear. The rhythm of someone trapped in a loop, desperate to relay what they had seen, what they had felt, before it consumed them entirely. I sank into my chair. My mind kept rewinding the voice. Every detail was precise, each observation exact. It was as though he'd been living my shift before I even knew it existed. Unit 8, do not ignore, do not dismiss. Over. I swallowed hard, and I understood. I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't dismiss it. Not if I wanted to make it through the night. They learn, they wait, they follow. Over. The voice faded again. Static. A hiss like wind through dry grass. And for a moment, I thought it was gone. Completely gone. But the weight remained. Heavy, cold, unseen, waiting. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the dark windows. The night pressed close, closer than it should have. And I knew Unit 44 hadn't stopped. He couldn't, and neither could I. Not really. The night was mine now, and theirs. And somewhere between the static and the shadows, I understood the first rule of listening to a voice from the past. Sometimes it isn't a recording. Sometimes it's a doorway. I didn't sleep that night, and I didn't want to. Not yet. The radio was quiet when I got to the station that night. Too quiet. I kept expecting it to burst to life with that static-laden whisper, that voice that had haunted me for the last 2 nights. But it didn't. Not at first. I sat at my desk, the dull hum of fluorescent lights above me keeping time with my pulse. My hands trembled slightly as I flipped through the log sheets from the previous night. Everything seemed normal. Routine calls, routine patrols. Nothing extraordinary, and yet something in me knew better. I turned the radio on, almost reflexively, and the static hissed to life. I hadn't touched the dial. The volume hadn't changed. And then, that voice. Unit 8, at the corner, lights flicker over. I froze. The corner of my station parking lot, where I had been standing 5 minutes ago, writing my log. My pulse spiked. My stomach dropped. I leaned closer to the speaker, trying to convince myself it was coincidence. But the words didn't stop. You're outside, walking toward the cruiser. Over. I swallowed hard, looking up from my desk. My eyes darted to the window. I was walking. I hadn't moved from my chair, and yet the voice described it exactly. The slow, measured steps I hadn't yet taken. The way my shadow stretched toward the cruiser under the pale light. Lights on, reflecting off your badge. Over. I caught a glint in the radio's and my stomach sank. He was describing me. Everything I was doing. Every movement. Every sound. Every flicker of light. And it wasn't just the parking lot. It was inside the station, too. The voice followed me from the desk to the doors, into the hallways, recounting my every action before I even did it. Approaching door 3, you hesitate. Over. I had frozen at door 3, my hand hovering over the handle. I hadn't even realized I'd moved. The voice whispered the hesitation, the pause, the little shiver in my fingers that I hadn't admitted to myself. Keypad beeping, entry denied. Over. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. Unit 44, what is happening? Over. Static. Then the words came again, softer now, almost like a sigh into my ear. They follow always, do not look. Over. I forced my eyes to the hallway behind me. Nothing. Just a faint flicker of the lights. Humming quietly. My shadow stretched across the tiles. And for a moment, I felt like it wasn't mine. That it moved a fraction differently than it should, as if something unseen was guiding it, watching me, cataloging me. Down the hall, turn right, locker room. Over. I could feel the sweat on my back. Cold and sticky. Every word was precise, like a map of my night. I hadn't been there yet, but the voice already knew, already saw it, already waited with me. You hear steps, not your own. Do not turn. Over. I couldn't help it. I turned, slowly, like I was afraid my own movement would alert whatever followed. Nothing. The hall was empty. My boot squeaked against the tile, echoing in the silence. But the echo wasn't quite right. It lingered a fraction too long, as if another set of feet were walking just behind me. Locker room door, half open, you pause. Over. I froze at the locker room. The door was ajar, exactly as the voice said. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't moved yet. And still, he had described it. Detailed, living, real. You breathe, slow, measured, they hear. Over. I could feel it now, pressing in from the edges of the station. Not the building, not the walls. Something else, waiting in the same space as Unit 44, had described years ago. Waiting for me, watching me. I wanted to laugh, to shake it off, tell myself I was imagining things. But the radio continued, relentless, precise, terrifying. Mirror in the locker room, reflecting, not just you. Over. My stomach twisted. I stepped closer to the door and glanced into mirror. My reflection was there, of course, but for a fraction of a second, I thought I saw something else behind me. A shadow taller than me, bending slightly at an impossible angle. I spun around. Nothing. The room was empty. Do not leave, they wait, always. Over. The words pierced me. Always. Waiting. Watching. Following. And it wasn't just the radio. I could feel it in the air, in the vibrations under my boots. in the faint hum that wasn't the fluorescent lights. Pet, override, attempt failed, over. I had reached the main door. My hand trembled on the handle. The voice spoke again, recounting exactly what I was doing, what I had yet to do, what I hadn't even thought. It was a mirror of my own actions, but twisted, alien, like someone or something was threading to my movements, anticipating, cataloging, waiting for the right moment. Do not look back, they follow closer, over. I stepped outside, the cold night air hitting me like a wall. The voice continued, matching my every step across the parking lot. Each word precise, a blueprint of my path. The cruiser I had parked in front of the station, already described, already cataloged. The engine idle, the lights off, everything as it should be, but not as it should be, not according to the voice. Cruiser door, open, you hesitate, over. I froze at the door. My hand shook on the handle. I hadn't moved yet, and still it had described me, told me what I would do next. Seat, dashboard, breath steady, they know, over. I sat in the cruiser, shaking. The voice continued, almost conversational now, like someone recounting a memory, but with urgent fear threading through it. Radio static whispers, Unit 8, you hear? They listen, over. I press my hand to the microphone. Unit 44, who is following me? What do you see? Over. Static, then a whisper, faint, almost like he was speaking into my mind instead of the radio. Same shift, same time, Unit 8, they are here. My heart thudded, so hard it hurt. My eyes darted to the trees beyond the parking lot. Shadows clung to the edges. Branches bent without wind. Something moved just out of sight. Always just out of sight. Always waiting. Always patient. Cannot stop, cannot leave, over. The words hung in the air. I wanted to leave. Run back inside. Lock every door. Tell myself it was over. But the radio continued, mapping my actions, mirroring me, predicting me. And somewhere in that, I realized the truth. The voice wasn't just describing a past patrol. It was threading my present into his past. His terror had become mine. His waiting had become mine. Unit 8, do not look behind, over. I turned slowly, barely breathing. Nothing but the weight of unseen eyes pressed on me. Every shadow, every whisper of the wind, every subtle flicker of light seemed to echo the words. They were here. They had always been here. Watching. Waiting. Final transmission, Unit 8, over. Static. White noise. And then silence. I sat in the cruiser for what felt like hours, shaking, trying to convince myself I hadn't heard it. But I knew. I had heard it. I had felt it. And somewhere in the static and the shadows, Unit 44's patrol still moved, still waited, still existed. And I knew, with a certainty that made my chest ache, that the next time the radio spoke, it wouldn't just be him, it would be them. And I would be exactly where they expected me to be. Nightfall always hit differently on the south side of the property. Most of the station's grounds were quiet, of course, but this patch, this stretch along the far fence line, felt off. The grass grew uneven, the shadows darker, and the wind never quite carried the right sound. Every night, it seemed to whisper. I first noticed it on a routine walk with my flashlight, just after my evening patrol began. The beam cut through the darkness, reflecting off the chain-link fence, slicing the shadows into long, jagged shapes. And there it was, a movement, slow, deliberate, nothing like a deer or a coyote. Too upright, too purposeful. I blinked, shook my head, and the shape was gone. Just the fence, just the dark. I told myself it was a trick of the light, maybe my imagination. Night shift had that effect. Loneliness made shadows creep across walls, over lawns, along fences. But when it happened again the next night, I felt that old, hollow sense of being watched. Someone moving just beyond the fence. Always just beyond. I started paying closer attention. Each night, I'd follow the perimeter, flashlight in hand, boots crunching over the gravel. I never saw it fully, just glimpses. A slight sway, a shadow that didn't match the trees, a glint of light reflecting off something pale. And every time, the movement would stop the moment I tried to focus on it. Who's there? I called once, loud enough to echo across the empty lot. My voice sounded alien, bouncing off the darkness in ways I hadn't expected. Silence answered. Nothing. But when I turned back toward the fence, a faint rustle, like the grass had shifted just behind it. Too slow, too careful to be wind. I started marking the spots where I saw it, or thought I did, with little chalk crosses on the gravel. By the end of the week, there were 6, each in different places, spaced just far enough apart to make me think it had walked the line, and then stopped, always stopped. The trail never continued. I tried telling my partner, but he laughed. Night shift paranoia. He said, "You've been staring at empty fences too long. Coffee's gone cold, and your brain's turning shadows into people." I nodded, forcing a smile, but I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in my bunk, listening to the wind scrape against the roof, and I could still see that sway along the fence line. Too precise, too intentional. The third night, I decided to stay longer. I parked my cruiser near the gate and watched. Headlights off, engine idling, radio muted. I needed to see it. Needed to know if it was real. Hours passed. The moon rose, pale and wan. The fence stretched on in a straight line. Nothing but metal links and darkness. Then, just before 2 a.m., movement. I froze. Slow. A figure, or something like one, slipped along the far side of the fence. It didn't run. It didn't dart. It moved like someone pacing, scanning. I raised my flashlight, and the beam caught the edge of it. Tall, thin, pale, and then gone, like smoke. I blinked, focused. Nothing. Just fence, grass, shadow. I walked the line the next day, checking for footprints, marks, anything. Nothing. Gravel smooth. Grass undisturbed. No trace of what I'd seen. I chalked it up to stress, overworked eyes, and long hours alone. But deep down I knew better. The nights became a ritual. Sit in the cruiser, wait, watch, mark. Each night the figure, or figures, moved slightly closer to the fence, though I never saw them near the road or the buildings. Always along the far edge, just beyond reach. I began noticing other things too. Shadows that lingered longer than they should, cold spots along my path where the air felt heavier, whispers in the wind that sounded almost like breath. Once, I caught a glimpse of it reflected in the rear-view mirror. Not my own reflection, but something behind me. A tall, thin silhouette, standing perfectly still. I spun around. Empty lot. Gravel crunching under my boots. No one, but the mirror had shown it. I stopped telling anyone. My partner, the deputies, the dispatcher. They'd think I was losing it. And maybe I was, but I knew what I had seen. And the feeling, that slow crawl of dread along my spine, didn't lie. The fence became my obsession. I would trace it with my eyes, flashlights, sometimes even the cruiser's beams, every night, checking the shadows, following the sway. And every night, the figure moved just out of reach. A rhythm developed, a pattern I couldn't place, like it was aware of me, waiting for something. One night, I heard it speak, or at least I thought I did, a low, guttural sound, almost like a whispering hiss. I spun, heart pounding. Nothing. The lot was empty. Only wind, only the rustle of leaves. But my ears rang with the sound, and then the shape along the fence shifted, just slightly, as if acknowledging me. I didn't move. I couldn't. The longer I watched, the more the station faded away. The lights inside became dull, insignificant. The night and the fence line, and whatever haunted it, became everything. Time lost meaning. Minutes stretched into hours. My flashlight battery dwindled, but I couldn't leave. I couldn't stop. I began noticing subtle changes too. Things left out in the lot moved slightly, not by wind. A trash can knocked over. Gravel shifted. My own footsteps echoed wrong, like someone or something was walking behind me, copying me, or maybe leading me, and always along the fence, always at the edge of vision. I tried to photograph it. Nothing appeared in the pictures. Just empty lot, chain link fence, grass, shadow. But in the corner of my eye, I swear I saw it, pale and tall, shifting when I blinked, always moving, always watching. Sleep became impossible. Even when I left the lot, when my shift ended, I couldn't shake the feeling. The fence haunted me. The sway, the pause, the unseen eyes. I dreamed of it too. Not nightmares, exactly. Not screams or monsters, but of pacing slow steps along a fence I couldn't reach, watching, waiting. Always watching, always waiting. I started marking my patrols more meticulously, hoping to find some evidence. Maybe a footprint, a discarded item, anything tangible. But the ground was smooth, the grass unbroken. Nothing. And the figure never strayed from the fence line, always just beyond, always moving, always patient. I began hearing things in my own head, a faint whisper, like static shaped into words, echoing phrases I couldn't understand. Sometimes it sounded like my own voice repeating my thoughts back at me. The loneliness of night shift made the sound feel alive. The fence felt alive. The dark beyond it breathed. I told myself I would confront it, catch it, shine my flashlight directly. I tried once. The beam cut through the darkness and hit the spot where I saw movement last. For a moment, I thought I saw the shadowed outline of a man, tall, still, and then, like smoke curling around a candle, it vanished. The light hit nothing. The grass didn't stir. The night was silent, still, empty. I sat in the cruiser, gripping the wheel, heartbeat hammering, staring at the far fence line. And I understood it didn't want to be caught. It never had. It simply existed along the edge, moving, pacing, observing, letting me know that I wasn't alone. Not really. Not ever. And now, every time I walk that line, every time I step outside the station at night, I feel the sway, the pause, the subtle rhythm, the quiet, patient presence along the far fence. I know it watches. I know it waits. And I know, deep down, it always has. I don't look for it anymore. I don't call it out. I just watch the fence, wait, and pray I don't get too close. Because one night, I fear it won't move away, and I don't know what I'll see then. I started noticing the footprints on my second week of patrols along the far fence line. It was late, well past midnight, and the lot was empty except for the hum of the station's lights and the occasional distant bark of a dog. I was walking perimeter, flashlights sweeping over the grass and gravel, trying to make sense of the faint sway I'd seen the night before. That's when I saw them, imprinted in the soft dirt just past the chain-link fence, a set of footprints, not human in size, too long, too narrow, but unmistakably deliberate. They were spaced unevenly, like someone or something was careful where it placed each step. They didn't move straight. They meandered slightly, as if inspecting the ground as it walked. I knelt, flashlight in hand, and traced the first few impressions. The dirt was damp from the night's dew, soft enough to hold the shape of the sole. The edges were sharp, crisp, too precise for an animal. My stomach clenched. I followed them. The prints continued for a while, winding along the edge of the fence, cutting across patches of gravel and mud, until, abruptly, they ended, just stopped. The dirt was untouched beyond that point. No drag marks, no scuff, nothing. It was as if the walker had simply lifted off the ground and disappeared. I froze, breath tight in my chest, flashlight trembling slightly. My mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe someone had been out here, pacing, then walked off the fence into the woods. But the woods started 50 feet away, and the soil there was soft. Something would have left marks. Something would have... Nothing. I stood up, scanning the area. The fence stretched in either direction, black shadows curling around its base. Nothing moving except the occasional bend of grass in the wind. But I felt it, the same oppressive weight I had when I first saw the figure. Watching, waiting, always watching. The next night, I returned, determined to track the footprints again. This time, I carried chalk to mark their path, hoping to map a pattern, understand pacing. It took hours of walking the line, but I found them again. Same location, same style, same abrupt stop. I marked each impression, careful not to disturb anything. I paced a lot, flashlight sweeping back and forth, calling out, "Who's there?" My voice bounced off the distant trees and empty fields. Nothing. The dirt held its secrets, silent. And the prints, the impossible prints, ended at the exact same spot as the night before. I stayed by them, crouched on my knees, flashlight low, listening. My own heartbeat was loud in my ears. And then I heard it, the faintest shift behind me. Gravel crunched softly, like a shoe tip barely brushing the ground. I spun. Empty lot. No one. No shadow. Nothing. I wanted to leave. I should have left. But something compelled me to stay, to watch, to follow. The figure was here. I knew it. I could feel it moving beyond my sight, its presence pressing against the darkness. Over the next week, I began noting small changes around the footprints. The soil seemed disturbed differently each night. Sometimes there were additional prints nearby, smaller, shallower, like they belonged to a child, or maybe a second figure. Sometimes the prints were close to the fence. Other times they curved further into the open field, always ending suddenly, always vanishing. I tried dragging a stick along the last impression, hoping to find a clue, something left behind. Nothing. The dirt was untouched beyond it. No smudges, no displaced stones, no sign of a path forward. Just an empty stretch leading into darkness. Sleep was impossible. I dreamed of the prints. Endless rows of footprints stopping mid-stride, vanishing into nothing, like a road to nowhere. I woke up with sweat soaking my uniform, heart hammering, and my mind replaying the faint rustle of movement behind me. One night, I followed the prints with my cruiser's headlights. The beams cast long shadows, turning ordinary objects into something sinister. The grass along the fence flickered with movement. Even though the wind was still, I slowed, stepping out, knees stiff from sitting too long, and crouched by the first footprint. It was sharper than I remembered, deeper, as if something heavier than a man had pressed down on it. I traced the line with my fingers, chalk in hand, step after step, careful not to disturb the pattern. Then I reached the end where the prints simply ended. I scanned the lot, feeling that familiar dread curl in my gut, and that's when I saw it. Just beyond the fence line, the shadows seemed wrong, not random, not caused by trees or grass. Something tall, thin, stretching, leaning just beyond sight, and it waited, always waiting. I raised my flashlight, hard in my throat. The beam hit nothing. The fence shimmered in the light. Ordinary. But the feeling persisted. The unnatural presence. The weight of unseen eyes. I knelt, chalk trembling in my hand, tracing the last impression again. And that's when the air shifted. The cold pressed in, a low hum vibrating through the soles of my boots. I want to call it in. Tell dispatch. But what would I say? Sir, footprints that end in nothing? They'd think I was joking, or worse, crazy. And yet, I couldn't shake the truth. I felt deep in my bones. Whatever had made those prints have been here, was still here, watching. I followed the footprints the next night, flashlight cutting a swath through the darkness. And then, halfway along the line, I saw another detail I hadn't noticed before. Small indentations in the dirt, almost like fingernail marks, trailing off the main set of prints. They stopped abruptly as well. Something crouched, touched the soil, then vanished. I staggered back, breath shallow. My hands gripped the flashlight, so tight the metal dug into my palms. The rational part of my brain argued. Animals win mistakes. But the prints told a different story. A presence that moved with intent. A creature or a person or something else that deliberately avoided detection. And it wasn't finished. By the end of the week, I was obsessive. The prints had become a nightly puzzle I couldn't leave unsolved. I stayed past midnight, flashlight in hand, knees scraping gravel, following the line, mapping the patterns. Sometimes I heard the soft brush of feet behind me. Sometimes the hum of something too low to be wind. Always, always, the prints ended, and I was left staring into the dark, wondering where the walker went. I stopped leaving my cruiser entirely. The lot became my world, fenced in by darkness and impossible tracks. I tried setting up cameras, motion sensors, anything. Nothing recorded the figure. The prints appeared. Then they stopped. Then they were gone. And in the videos, there was only empty dirt, empty grass, empty night. One night, crouched over the last impression, I whispered, almost to myself, "Why stop here?" The wind responded with a low sigh, a sound like the echo of a voice. And then the ground in front of me shifted slightly. I jumped back. Nothing. Just the soil settling, or maybe not. I began to dread the patrols. The lot was no longer just a workplace. It was a corridor for something I could feel, but not see. Each set of prints was a promise, a trail that led to nowhere, a message that I wasn't alone, that the line between the fence and the open lot was not mine to command. Sleep became nightmares. I dreamed of footprints continuing into darkness forever, of shadows stretching tall and thin, of hands touching soil and vanishing. I woke with a memory of cold air pressing down and the echo of movement I couldn't place. By the third week, I was nearly living at the fence line. Daylight hours were brief naps. Night was for walking, tracing, watching, and still, the prints appeared, always new, always stopping abruptly, always taunting me with their impossible end. I realized that I had stopped asking who or what was making them. I only wanted to know if it had noticed me. And in the spaces between the last footprint and the darkness beyond, I felt the answer. It had. I can't explain what I saw, what I felt. I can't rationalize it. I only know the truth of it. Footprints in soft dirt, winding, careful, deliberate, then nothing. The walker vanished. Every single night. Always. And I am left staring into the darkness, knowing I will never understand why. I watch the prints. I map them. I trace them with chalk. I follow. And every night they stop. And every night I feel that weight just beyond the fence line. Waiting. Patient. Silent. Watching. I can't leave the lot. I can't stop walking the fence. Because if I do, if I ever stop, whatever made those tracks will reach me. And I don't know what it will take. I used to tell myself I would never cross the fence. That line of chain link had always felt like a boundary, not just between the lot and the woods, but between what I understood and what I didn't. I walked along it every night, traced it with my flashlight, marked the ground near with chalk, but I never stepped past it. Not until the night I saw the shadow clearly. It started the same way it always did. Late, quiet, the kind of quiet that feels padded, like the world has been wrapped in thick cloth. No wind, no distant traffic, just the low hum of the station behind me and the faint buzz of insects far off in the trees. I was walking perimeter, flashlight low, beams sweeping slow arcs across dirt and grass. My boots crunched softly with every step. Each sound felt too loud, too final. I already knew where the footprints would be. They were there, a single trail, pressed deep into the soft dirt along the fence line. Long, narrow, unevenly spaced. The same careful path I had memorized over weeks of sleepless nights. I followed them. I always did, step by step. I walked beside the impressions, my light hovering inches above the ground. I could see the sharp edges of each print, the weight behind them, the intent. And just like always, they ended. One final impression. Then nothing. Empty dirt, undisturbed soil, no scuff marks, no drag lines, no second trail. It felt like staring at the edge of a cliff in the dark. Your eyes know there's nothing in front of you, but your body refuses to believe it. I stood there longer than I meant to. My breath fogged the air. My flashlight beam shook in my hand. That was when I noticed something new. Not on the ground, on the fence. A shadow, not cast by my light, not shaped like the fence posts or nearby trees. It was tall, too tall. It clung to the chain link like a stain, stretching upward in a long, thin column. The edges of it were soft, blurred, like smoke trying to hold a shape. I slowly raised my flashlight. The beam crossed the fence. The shadow stayed. My light didn't create it. My light didn't erase it. It just existed. I felt the blood drain from my face. I told myself not to move. I told myself not to speak. The shadows shifted. Not much, just enough to feel intentional, like something adjusting its posture, like someone straightening up after leaning too long. My heart started pounding, so hard I thought I might pass out. I whispered, barely louder than my own breathing, "Sheriff's Department, identify yourself." The words sounded thin, Weak. They vanished into the dark without echo. The shadow didn't respond. It didn't rush. It didn't step forward. It didn't step back. It just stood there, waiting. The shape had no clear features. No eyes. No face. No limbs I could clearly define. But I could tell where its head should be. I could feel where it was looking. At me. I took a slow step backward. The shadow did not move. Another step back. Still nothing. It wasn't chasing. It wasn't retreating. It was holding its place. That was worse. Much worse. My radio crackled softly at my shoulder. Static. Low. Uneven. I flinched so hard my flashlight beam jerked upward into the trees. When I aimed it back at the fence, the shadow was still there, but closer. Not closer in distance. Closer in presence. Harder to look at, like the air around it had thickened. My mind searched desperately for normal explanations. Fence shadow. Tree shadow. Light angle. Eye strain. Lack of sleep. But none of that explained why the shadow stood on the inside of the fence. On my side. I hadn't noticed that at first. I saw it clearly now. The shadow wasn't beyond the fence. It wasn't in the woods. It wasn't outside the property. It was inside, between me and the station. My stomach twisted. Slow. Heavy. Sick. I realized something else. The footprints. They didn't end at the fence. They ended a few feet before it, right where the shadow stood, like the walker had stopped and simply stayed. I backed up another step. Gravel crunched under my boot. The shadow's outline twitched. Not a full movement. Not a step. More like a ripple. Like something under a sheet shifting its weight. I turned and ran. I didn't sprint. I didn't scream. I didn't even look back. I moved fast enough to feel my lungs burn, but slow enough not to fall. The station lights came into view, glowing soft and yellow through the darkness. Safety. Structure. Reality. I didn't stop until I was inside. The door slammed shut behind me with a hollow bang that echoed through the empty building. I leaned against the wall, hands on my knees, sucking in air. For a long time, I just listened. No footsteps, no scratching, no voice, just the hum of fluorescent lights. I told myself I had imagined it, that exhaustion had finally won, that the shadow was a trick. A shape born from too many sleepless nights and too much silence. I almost believed it. Almost. Until the next night. I tried to avoid the fence. I really did. I stayed closer to the building. I focused on paperwork. On inventory. On anything that kept me busy. But the feeling never left. That pull. That pressure. Like something unfinished tugging at me from the dark. Around 1:30 a.m., my radio crackled. Just static, then nothing. No dispatch call, no voice, just a short burst. I stood up without thinking. I grabbed my flashlight. My feet carried me toward the door. I hated myself for it. I hated that part of me that needed to know. The night looked the same as always. Still, cold, empty. I walked slower this time. Each step felt heavy. My beam swept the ground. No footprints. Not yet. I reached the fence line. I didn't go all the way to the spot. I stopped about 10 feet back. My flashlight hovered over the dirt. Then I saw them forming. Not appearing. Not materializing. Forming. One shallow indentation pressed into the soft soil. Then another. Then another. Like something invisible was walking. Slow. Careful. Deliberate. The prints made their path toward the fence. Toward the same place. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The last footprint pressed down. And stopped. Silence. Then I saw it. The shadow was already there. In the same spot. Same height. Same shape. Waiting. Only this time, I knew something I hadn't before. It wasn't just standing there. It had been standing there all along. Every night. Every time I found the footprints. Every time they stopped. They stopped because the walker had reached home. The shadow leaned forward, just a little, not a step, not a lunge, a lean, like someone curious, like someone examining a reflection. I felt tears fill my eyes, not from sadness, not even from fear, from the overwhelming certainty that I was standing in front of something that did not belong to my world, something that wore a shape only loosely, something patient, something ancient. I whispered, "What do you want?" The shadow did not answer, but I felt something brush against my thoughts. Not words, not images, just a pressure, a sense of attention, of awareness, like I had finally been noticed. I took a step back. The shadow leaned forward again, matching me, keeping the distance exactly the same. I took another step back. So did it, not moving its feet, not shifting location, just leaning, as if the space between us was elastic, stretching, breathing. I understood then. It didn't need to chase. It didn't need to grab. It didn't need to move. All it had to do was wait, because eventually I would be tired. Eventually I would hesitate. Eventually I would step too close. I turned away, walked, did not run, did not look back. Inside the station, I locked the door. I sat at the desk with my back against the wall. I did not sleep. I did not close my eyes. Morning came like it always does. Soft, gray, uncaring. When I checked the fence in daylight, there was nothing. No shadow, no footprints, no marks, just dirt, just chain link, just grass. But I know what I saw, and I know where it stands. Every night, when the world grows quiet, I feel it again, not behind me, not beside me, not in front of me, at the fence, waiting, patient, certain. I don't walk the perimeter anymore. I don't look for footprints. I don't shine my flashlight into the dark, because I already know what's there. And I know one day, when I am tired enough, when I am slow enough, when I make one small mistake, it won't just stand at the fence. It will take one step, and that will be enough. I thought I had a handle on it. On the fence, on the prints, on the shadow that haunted the far side of the property. I thought keeping my distance, keeping my routine, keeping my eyes on the dirt and the chain link would be enough to stay safe, that I could compartmentalize it into something I saw, but didn't have to engage with. I was wrong. The night was cold, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and refuses to leave. I had parked at the edge of the cemetery, my cruiser's lights cutting through the fog that had rolled in from the lowlands. The gravestones sat like broken teeth in the white mist, each marker pale and leaning, the inscriptions blurred by years of wind and rain. My boots sank slightly into the wet ground as I stepped onto the gravel path, flashlight in hand, heart trying to keep a steady rhythm but failing. It started as a feeling, that faint, crawling awareness that I wasn't alone. Nothing moved. No wind stirred the trees. No owl hooted. The radio in my cruiser lay silent, dead as a tomb. Yet the sense of presence was overwhelming, as if the fog itself had weight and intention. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was a long shift, too many nights, eyes adjusting to shadows. But instinct screamed otherwise. I started walking the perimeter again, flashlight sweeping low. I had memorized the cemetery's paths, the clusters of graves, the empty corners where the earth had sunk and roots twisted beneath. Every step was deliberate, careful. My eyes scanned the fence line, the old chain link that separated the property from the woods. But it was empty, no shadow, nothing. And yet, I felt it. Then I saw the first movement, not at the fence, not in the trees. Right there in my periphery, a flicker, a shift of darkness along the gravestones. My pulse spiked. I swung my flashlight toward the spot. Nothing, just mist curling around a leaning headstone. I told myself I was imagining it. I moved closer to the area where the first prints had always ended. My boots pressed into the soft dirt, leaving marks that would be washed away by morning dew. And then I saw it, not fully, but enough. A shape, dark and tall, leaning slightly forward. Its head tilted in a way that felt human, almost inquisitive. I froze. It wasn't at the fence. It was closer now, near me, but the impossible part was the way it moved. Not toward me, not away. It mimicked me. I took a step forward. So did it. I raised my flashlight. So did it, slowly, lazily, like a reflection, like water catching the light just right. My hand shook. I swallowed hard. The mist curled around its feet, but I couldn't tell where it began or ended. It was like watching a shadow cast by some invisible sun, except the sun was me. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. I whispered, "Who's there?" The word was lost in the fog. Silence, then a movement, not audible, not physical in the normal sense, but the shape mirrored the tilt of my head. I jerked back. It jerked back, mimicking my hesitation. I tried to reason. Could it be a person? A trespasser? Someone hiding among the graves? Moving with uncanny precision? My logic faltered. This was too deliberate, too precise. No human could move like that without intention, without thought. And this was too patient, too aware. I began walking, deliberately slow. My flashlight cut a narrow path in front of me. Step by step, the shadow mirrored me. I tried to lose it. I turned sharply toward another row of gravestones. It followed. I crouched, holding my breath. It crouched. Every motion, every pause, every slight adjustment, it matched perfectly. Panic started to rise. Not sharp, sudden panic. Slow, insidious panic. Like water filling a room you can't escape from. My mind raced. What did it want? Why me? And the most horrifying thought. What if I wasn't supposed to notice it? What if the moment I truly saw it, really saw it, it would be too late? I stopped entirely. Heart pounding in my ears. My breath thick and wet in the cold air. I forced myself to stare at the mist where the shadow had been. It was there, closer than I expected, even without moving. I realized it wasn't just mimicking my motions. It was studying me, learning me, calculating, anticipating. Every shiver, every shift of weight, every blink, every shallow breath, it knew. I turned slowly, walking backward toward the cruiser. Every step felt heavier than the last. Gravel crunched underfoot. My flashlight danced over headstones, catching glints of wet stone. And the shadow, always a few steps behind, perfectly in sync, always present, yet never touching. I reached the cruiser. My hands shook as I fumbled with the keys. Try to lock the doors before sliding inside. Try to convince myself the lights and steel barrier would be enough. But even in the cab, even with the engine humming, I felt it watching from the mist. Felt the weight of that presence pressing down through glass. The metal, the fog. I started the engine. Headlights cut slices through the cemetery's fog. I drove slowly, careful not to disturb the shadow, careful not to trigger whatever was that lingered there. And the impossible happened. It moved with me, not physically, not in the road, not on the asphalt, but in my mind, in my chest, in the way the air felt too tight. My own reflection in the rearview mirror seemed wrong, slightly darker, longer, warped. I tried to shake it off. I tried to convince myself that fear made shadows stretch, made reflections lie. But deep down I knew better. The shadow wasn't in the mist. It was here wherever I was. And it wasn't bound by distance, by walls, by light. I parked at the edge of the property again, shaking, tried to reason with myself. Maybe I had been alone all along. Maybe this was just exhaustion, paranoia, long nights in the same empty graveyard. Then I saw the footprints. They appeared at the curb beside the cruiser. Wet, fresh, deep into the soft gravel. My boots hadn't disturbed them. I hadn't placed them there, and they led toward the cemetery, stopping abruptly near the first row of headstones. I knew better than to follow them. I knew that, and yet some part of me, the part that had always been curious, that had always chased the prints, wanted to. I didn't. I just watched, flashlight trembling, engine idling, and the shadow leaned forward again. Only a little, just a tilt of a head, almost questioning. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes? Hours? Time felt wrong. Eventually, the fog started to thin. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon. The shadow receded, not vanished, not gone, just waiting. And I understood something horrifying. It wasn't just at the fence anymore. It wasn't just following me. It was patient, eternal, constant. Every time I walk these grounds, every time I patrol this property, it will be there. Not behind me, not beside me, not in front. Somewhere in the space I can't define. Always moving with me, always learning, always watching. I can't leave. Not really. I'm bound to this place. And I'm bound to it 2, now, in a way I didn't understand before, because it knows me, and I know it. I don't think it will ever stop. And maybe that's worse than any chase, any attack, any collision with flesh and bone. Maybe the worst thing is knowing you are never, ever alone. I remember the call like it was etched into my brain, clear and wrong in the way nightmares are wrong. I was just settling into my shift, coffee lukewarm in a paper cup, the station quiet except for the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead, the kind of quiet that presses on you, fills every empty corner, makes you listen to your own heartbeat. Dispatch came over the radio, voice calm, routine, but the address, it didn't exist. Not anywhere I knew, not on any map. Unit 6, 4312 North Hollow Road. Reported disturbance. Investigate immediately. I frowned. I double-checked the screen on my cruiser's GPS. Nothing. The road didn't exist. The numbers didn't exist. It was like the call had been made into a void. Unit 6 to dispatch. I'm showing no such road. Can you confirm? My voice sounded steadier than I felt. A brief pause, and then, almost too casually, affirmative Unit 6. Proceed. Call reports unusual activity. Check the location. I blinked. Something in the air shifted. Like a shadow moved across the room behind me. I shook it off. I had my cruiser, my flashlight, my training. There was nothing to fear. It was just a call. Just a routine check. North Hollow Road. I repeated it to myself as I drove. North Hollow. Hollow. Funny how words feel heavier when you don't know what they're attached to. The GPS recalculated endlessly, offering nothing but a blinking question mark. I tried not to panic. I told myself it was miscommunication, a wrong address. Someone panicked on a payphone, a prank. But when you've worked night shifts long enough, you know that sinking feeling in your stomach isn't just nerves. It's instinct, and my instincts were screaming. I drove anyway, taking the main roads out past the last homes, where the streetlights thinned into darkness. The trees leaned toward the road like they were listening, branches creaking in the windless night. Fog had begun to rise, thin at first, brushing the tops of the grass, curling along the asphalt like smoke from an unseen fire. I should have turned back then. I should have called dispatch again, told them the address was invalid, demanded clarification. But I didn't. Something, curiosity, duty, stubbornness, kept me moving forward. The further I went, the more the air changed. Not colder, exactly, but heavier, almost wet, as if the fog itself had weight. My headlights cut through it in narrow beams, illuminating nothing but the blackened silhouettes of trees. And yet I felt it. Movement. Not up ahead, not in the trees, not along the road, but around me, in the corners of my vision, just beyond the reach of the lights. Something shifted. I told myself it was branches, maybe a deer, a raccoon, but the shifting continued, too deliberate, too rhythmic to belong to animals. The road, or what I assumed was a road, turned sharply, though my GPS remained useless, still blinking its question mark. I slowed, scanning with my flashlight, the car's tires crunching over gravel that had no business being there. A fence loomed on the right, old, sagging, barbed wire bent and rusted. Beyond it, darkness. Absolute, unbroken darkness, except for the fog curling at its edges. And then the first sound, a low creak, not the fence, not the branches. Something heavier, something deliberate. I froze, hand on the wheel, listening. The sound stopped, and then, from the fog, a whisper of movement, too quiet to be human, too patterned to be random. I started the engine again, easing forward. My hands were sweating. I felt a pull like gravity had shifted slightly, tugging me toward that nothing place beyond the fence. My heartbeat quickened, my mind screaming at me to turn back. But my training kicked in. Routine, protocol, investigation. I reached the end of what I assumed was the road. No houses, no buildings, no lights, just fog and the weight of silence pressing in on me from every direction. I grabbed the radio. Dispatch. Unit 6 here. I'm on site. There's nothing here. I repeat, nothing. No disturbance. No address. Static. The kind you hear when the signal drops in the middle of nowhere, then a voice, not dispatch, not familiar, a low, measured tone, distorted, almost mechanical. Unit 6. Proceed, follow the path. I froze. My fingers tightened on the radio. Who is this? This isn't dispatch. Identify yourself. Silence. Then the same distorted voice. Unit 6, proceed. Path ahead. My skin crawled. My mind spun through possibilities. Prank, technical malfunction. Someone messing with the system. But none of them explained the feeling in my chest. That cold, hollow weight. The sensation of eyes on the back of my neck. I shined my flashlight into the fog. Nothing. Only the fence and the empty, wet grass. I stepped out of the cruiser, boots crunching softly on gravel that seemed to grow colder with every step. The voice came again, faint, almost mocking. Unit 6, follow the path. Do not stray. I tried to respond, but my throat went dry. I can't see any path. There's nothing here. A pause, and then a sound behind me. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, too heavy to be mine. I swung the flashlight around, light slicing through the fog. Empty. I turned slowly in a circle. Empty. And then a whisper from the radio, impossibly close, as if inside my own skull. Do not turn. Unit 6 follow. I stumbled backward, heart hammering. My mind raced. The address didn't exist. The path didn't exist. And yet, the voice, the presence, the footsteps, they all insisted on a place that shouldn't be there. That couldn't be. Something shifted in the fog. I saw it then. Not a person. Not fully. A shape. Tall. Leaning slightly forward, edges blurred. Like smoke caught in a weak beam of light. And for a fraction of a second, I felt eyes. Not looking at me. Not at my body. But through me, into the hollow spaces inside. I stumbled back into the cruiser, slamming the door, locking it. My hands shook as I fumbled with the keys. The radio crackled again. Unit 6 continued. Follow. The engine roared to life. Headlights sliced through the fog, catching nothing, illuminating only the void beyond the fence. I backed up slowly, and then inexplicably, the path ahead seemed longer, stretched, twisted. The fence bent strangely. Shadows elongated unnaturally. Every instinct screamed to flee, but my brain was stuck on protocol. Investigation. Duty. I drove slowly, headlights cutting through the mist, eyes darting to the edges where shadows gathered unnaturally. Every shadow seemed to shift as I passed, mimicking the shapes of gravestones, trees, rocks. But wrong. Too perfect, too deliberate. I wanted to call for backup, to tell dispatch, but the radio remained silent. Not dead, not static. Silent. I don't know how long I drove. Minutes? Hours? Time felt wrong. At one point, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw a dark shape in the fog. Not moving toward me. Not behind. Just there, waiting, watching, always at the edge of sight, always patient, always present. By the time I returned to the station, the fog had lifted. The first light of dawn seeped through the windows. I told myself it was over, that whatever had happened was a trick of the night, exhaustion, nerves, but the voice remained in my mind. Low, insistent, patient. Unit 6, follow the path. I haven't seen the address again. It doesn't appear on any map. Dispatch denies ever sending the call. And yet, sometimes at night, when the station is quiet and the fluorescent lights hum, I hear it faintly on the radio, just at the edge of understanding, just beyond reason. And I know I'll follow it one day, because even though it doesn't exist, even though no road leads anywhere, it has my attention. And now it has my mind. I can't stop listening. I didn't know how long I had been driving down that service road. The asphalt had cracked decades ago, weeds pushing through in stubborn little bursts, and the trees leaned closer with every mile, branches brushing the roof of the cruiser like hands trying to hold me back. The GPS was useless, a mocking screen of flashing question marks. I told myself it was just a forgotten road, abandoned, rarely used, nothing more. And yet, something had led me here. I didn't know why, but I felt pulled. The fog from earlier had lifted slightly, but the air was still damp, sticky, carrying the smell of rotting leaves and wet earth. My headlights illuminated only a few feet ahead. Then, as if conjured from the mist itself, I saw it. The house. It was small, almost hidden, swallowed by trees that pressed in so tightly it seemed impossible it had ever been noticed by anyone. The siding was gray and peeling. Windows caked with grime, some broken, some boarded up with splintered wood. The roof sagged in the middle, like it had given up years ago. A single chimney leaned to one side, crooked as though laughing quietly at my approach. I slowed, gripping the wheel tightly. There were no cars here, no driveway, really. Just a cracked road ending in a shallow gravel clearing that the trees hadn't claimed yet. I could feel the house watching me, though it had no eyes. Something about it felt alive, a quiet heartbeat that pulsed against my chest. I killed the engine and sat for a long moment. The radio was silent now, nothing but static from earlier, the voice gone, or perhaps waiting. I didn't move at first, afraid that movement would awaken something in the house, and maybe it already was awake. Finally, I opened the door. The air outside smelled like old wood dust and something fouler I couldn't place. I stepped down, boots crunching on gravel, each step echoing into the heavy silence. The trees seemed to lean closer, their shadows falling in sharp, jagged lines across the broken porch. I circled the house, flashlight cutting through the darkness. There were no footprints here, no recent signs of life, and yet the air felt disturbed, as though I had walked into a place that existed somewhere between now and a memory long buried. The front door was partially ajar, one hinge screaming in protest when I pushed it gently. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the smell hit me fully: mildew, decay, and something else. Something metallic, coppery. I forced myself to step inside. My boots sank slightly into the floor, which felt soft in places, weak with rot. The living room was dark, the remnants of furniture decayed and sagging. Cobwebs hung in thick curtains from ceiling to floor. A rocking chair sat in the corner, moving slightly, though there was no wind. I froze. My breath echoed in the small room. The chair stopped. I tried to rationalize it. Rodents, maybe the boards beneath the floor shifting. But the way it had moved was too deliberate, almost as if it had been waiting, almost like it had been expecting me. I moved further in, flashlights sweeping over broken pictures on the walls. Faces, faded and scratched, stared back at me. Smiling children, adults with stern expressions, a family long forgotten. I couldn't read the names, but the eyes felt alive, watching me, following me. A staircase led upward. I hesitated, listening. Nothing. No wind, no creak, just silence. I gripped the flashlight tighter. Every instinct screamed to leave, to turn around and drive away. But curiosity rooted me. I stepped onto the first stair. It groaned under my weight. I paused, listening, but there was nothing else. The second floor was worse. Dust coated everything in a thick layer, disturbed only in places where footprints, or something like footprints, had pressed through. The hallway stretched ahead of me. Doors closed, paint peeling from frames. I shined a light into each doorway, revealing empty rooms, decayed furniture, sheets draped like corpses over what might have been beds or chairs. Then I saw it, a small room at the end of the hall. The door slightly open. I could hear movement. No, not movement. A soft whispering. So faint I almost thought I imagined it. But it was there. A sound like breath, or paper rustling, or something worse. I took a step closer. Inside, the room was dark. My flashlight beam caught a table in the center, scattered with objects. Old papers, broken toys, a lantern that had rusted beyond use. But something else drew my attention. Marks on the floor. Footprints. Small, bare, delicate. They led from the far corner to the center of the room, and then stopped. Abruptly, I knelt, trying to make sense of them. The wood floor beneath had rotted slightly, but the prints were clear, recent, impossible yet undeniable. I traced the edges with my fingers. Whoever or whatever had walked here had vanished without a trace. A sudden coldness brushed against the back of my neck. I whipped around. Nothing. The window panes rattled slightly, though the night was still. My flashlight flickered. I cursed under my breath, tapping it, checking batteries. No problem. The light steadied. I turned back to the footprints. That's when I noticed the corner. A shadow. No, not a shadow. Something darker than shadow. A black shape clinging to the far wall. It didn't move, didn't breathe, but it felt wrong. Alive in a way that would and dusk could not be. My heartbeat thundered. Every story I'd heard, every warning about places forgotten by time, screamed in my mind. I wanted to run. I wanted to tell myself. It was a trick of the light, but something in me couldn't look away. The shape seemed to lean slightly forward. Not fully, but just enough to suggest anticipation. I stumbled backward, almost knocking over the lantern. It clanged against the floor, startling me with a sharp echo that filled the room. The shadow remained, silent, watching, waiting. I tried to speak, to call out, but my voice was hoarse. Who's there? I whispered. Nothing. The air grew heavier, thick, pressing against my chest. I could feel my ribs tighten, my lungs resisting. I swallowed, forcing my voice. Dispatch, anyone. The radio in my jacket crackled to life. A faint voice, distant, distorted. Unit 6, follow the path. I froze. My mind raced. Not again. Not here. I hadn't called dispatch. This place shouldn't even exist. And yet, the voice was here, cutting through the silence. I dropped the radio, clutching it in my hands. The whispering from the corner of the room shifted, moving closer, though I couldn't see it. I ran, down the stairs, out the door, back to the cruiser. The headlights caught the fog creeping in between the trees. The house sat silent behind me, unbroken, as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. Something had watched me, had waited, had followed. I never got a clear look at it. Not really. But the prints remained in my mind. And sometimes when I drive down that road at night, headlights cutting to the black, I swear I see something in the windows, pale and still, watching, waiting for me to return. And I know one day I will. I didn't want to go back. Not really, after the way the house had looked from the road. It's silence. It's waiting. The shadow I glimpsed in the corner of my eye. I should have driven off and never looked back. But something had anchored me there. Call it curiosity. Call it a duty. I didn't want to go back. Not really, after the way the house had looked from the road. It's silence. It's waiting. The shadow I glimpsed from the corner of my eye. I should have driven off and never looked back. But something had anchored me there. Call it curiosity. Call it a duty I didn't understand. Or call it fear that needed to be faced. I parked at the edge of the clearing and stared at the house. It had changed since last night. Or maybe I had changed. My memory played tricks. But the windows seemed cleaner, almost recently wiped. Streaks faint against the grime. The boards on the broken porch shifted slightly, as if someone had walked across them. My stomach tightened. Someone or something had been here. I climbed out of the cruiser, flashlight in hand, the beam trembling slightly. Each step onto the gravel sent small stones skittering like dry teeth across the ground. The fog was heavier than before, hugging the trees like fingers, and the air smelled wetter, earthier, with a faint metallic tang beneath it. My boots crunched toward the door. The front porch sagged under my weight, groaning, whispering warnings I wasn't ready to heed. The door was closed this time, but not latched, not locked, just standing there waiting. I gripped the knob, and a cold shiver ran up my arm. I twisted, and it opened smoothly, almost willingly. Inside, the air was thick, warmer than outside, carrying the scent of old wood, damp fabric, and faint smoke. I noticed immediately that something had been here very recently. Dust was disturbed in footprints I hadn't seen yesterday. A trail led from the doorway to the center of the living room. Each print was distinct, though small, almost childlike. I followed them with my eyes, slowly, deliberately. The living room furniture had been shifted. Chairs no longer leaned at awkward angles. They were pushed neatly against the walls. A table in the center of the room had a thin layer of dust, but it was streaked in places, wiped as if someone had cleaned it carefully. My throat went dry. Who or what could have done this? I ran my flashlight along the walls. Pictures had been rotated. Faded family portraits stared back at me, but their positions were different. Faces turned toward me. I wasn't imagining it. I stepped closer. One frame had been removed entirely, leaving a patch of cleaner wall behind it. I felt eyes on me, though I knew it was only the house, or at least that's what I told myself. A faint sound drew my attention, a soft shuffle upstairs. I froze, heart hammering. I told myself it was the wind settling against the roof, or maybe a branch brushing the window, but the sound repeated, deliberate. Footsteps. Not heavy, not loud. Careful, quiet, measured steps pacing from one side of the house to the other. I gripped my flashlight like a lifeline and moved toward the staircase. Each step groaned under my weight. Dust puffed up in small clouds with each footfall. The hallway upstairs was narrower than I remembered. The ceiling lower, the walls almost pressing in on me. The footprints from yesterday were gone, replaced by smaller, fresher ones. They led down the hall and then disappeared again, just like the ones in the living room. I entered the first room on the left. It was empty. The floorboards looked solid, though patches of rot gave me pause. A small bed had been neatly made, sheets tucked in despite their age. The pillow was indented, as if someone had rested their head there recently. My breath caught in my throat. I moved to the next room. A small fire had been built in the fireplace. Not recent, not smoldering, but the ashes were disturbed, smooth over like someone had checked it carefully and then left. On the mantel sat a small collection of objects, a cup, a notebook, a rusted knife. Each item had been arranged with an almost deliberate order. Someone had been here, someone alive, though no one was visible. The third room had more subtle signs. On the floor, scratch marks in what suggested movement. The closet door was ajar, and inside, clothes hung neatly, folded with care. A single shoe had been left on the floor. I knelt to examine it. Small, childlike, my stomach twisted. I hadn't imagined the footprints in the living room or the hallway. Someone or something lived here, and I hadn't expected to find it so domestic. I backed out of the room slowly, careful not to make noise. The hallway seemed longer than before. My flashlight beam caught the end of it, where the wall looked darker, cleaner. A door stood slightly open. I approached, each step measured, heartbeat thundering in my ears. The air grew colder, though I couldn't tell if it was just my nerves. I peeked inside. Nothing, or at least nothing that should have been alive. A chair swiveled slowly on its own, the motion too smooth to be caused by wind. On the floor, papers had been stacked neatly, with writing I couldn't read, but the handwriting was fresh. The smell of ink and paper was strong. Someone had been here within hours. I swallowed, realizing that the house wasn't abandoned. Not really. Then I heard it, a whisper, soft, almost melodic, but impossible to place. Words, maybe, or just sounds mimicking speech. I spun around, flashlight swinging, searching the room. Shadows pooled in the corners, and I could swear the darkness itself was moving, coalescing, watching. My chest tightened. The whispering grew louder, echoing softly, as if from all directions at once. I took a step back. Another step. My flashlight flickered. The whispering stopped. Silence. I exhaled shakily. The room was still, empty. The footprints, the disturbed furniture, the ash. It was all real, and yet no one. Whoever had been here had vanished again. And I knew, somewhere deep down, it hadn't gone far. I decided to leave. I wanted to run, to drive back to the road and never return. But then I noticed something new. On the floor near the doorway, a single sheet of paper. My flashlight beam landed on it. A crude drawing of a figure. Tall, thin, shadowed. Its head tilted slightly like it was observing. At the bottom, a note. I see you. I froze. My mind raced. I had been careful, aware of every step, every sound. And yet, somehow, I had been expected. Watched. Followed. The house wasn't empty. It was never empty. I backed out slowly, keeping the flashlight trained on the room. Every nerve screamed to leave. The air felt heavy, almost alive. And then I saw it, a movement out of the corner of my eye. Shadows on the far wall shifted, darker than they should have been. Not just shadows. Something that shouldn't exist in the shape of a man. A shape that bent, twisted, and then stopped, as if considering me. I ran down the stairs, boots pounding the rotted wood, the air thick with dust and something fouler I couldn't name. I threw open the front door, sprinted to my cruiser, fumbling with keys in a panic. The engine roared to life. As I looked back, the house seemed normal, empty, silent, waiting. I drove away slowly, flashlight sweeping across the trees in the fog, expecting to see movement behind me. Nothing, only the empty road and the oppressive darkness, and a sense that something had followed me, always following. Even now, the memory of the footprints, the whispered words, the figure watching from the corner, haunts me. The house isn't gone. It waits. It will wait. And I know one day I'll have to go back, because it's not done with me yet. I pulled up to the edge of the road where I left my cruiser hours ago, heart still hammering, and stared at the spot where the house had stood. The fog had thinned, and the trees looked ordinary now, unmoving, lifeless in the dim moonlight. I blinked once, twice, hoping my eyes were deceiving me. But no, there was nothing. No boards, no porch, no windows, no signs of life. Only the trees and the gravel road stretching into darkness. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog from my mind. Maybe exhaustion had played tricks on me. Maybe I'd imagined the footprints, the whispering, the careful movements. I told myself it had to be a dream, a trick of the light, some leftover adrenaline from patrolling the back roads. But my hands were shaking, and my flashlight still had that tremor I couldn't control. I dialed dispatch. Dispatch 214. Go ahead, 214. I swallowed hard. You sent me to a disturbance at property off the old service road near Cedar Creek. My voice sounded strange, even to me, tight and unsteady. There was a pause on the other end. Cedar Creek? There's no record of that call. No address listed. 214. Are you sure you got that from us? I rubbed my eyes. Positive. I have the call time, the details. Someone reported something unusual. Another pause. 214, there was no call. Nobody reported anything. That area has been vacant for years. There shouldn't be a house there. Not now, not ever. I swallowed. My chest tightened. I saw a house. It was... someone had been living there. I went inside. There were signs, footprints of fire, furniture arranged. I swear dispatch. It was... The line went quiet for a moment, then a soft voice, clinical, detached. 214, check your logs. We're not seeing anything in the system. Are you sure you're not mistaken? I felt a wave of nausea. I'm not. I saw it. It was real. Someone or something was in that house. I didn't see them, but my voice broke. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Silence. Then, finally, the dispatch voice returned, flat and unhelpful. 214, we're going to need you to verify your location. Nothing shows up on your GPS. You're not where you're reporting. I looked around the trees, the empty gravel, the stillness. I was exactly where I had been before. My cruiser sat behind me, exactly where I left it. The moonlight illuminated everything. Nothing had moved except my own racing heart. I'm right here. I swear, I said. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. The house was... There was a house. Someone had been inside. Footprints, fire, furniture. The dispatch line crackled. 214. 214. Please calm down. We're running a check on the coordinates. Remain at your vehicle. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. Calm down. Calm down. I told myself. Maybe it had been an abandoned structure that partially collapsed, that appeared and disappeared depending on the fog. Maybe exhaustion, maybe stress. I could explain it, rationalize it. Maybe. I stepped out of the cruiser again, flashlight sweeping the area. The trees stretched endlessly. The service road was empty. I began walking along the gravel, searching, anything to anchor myself to reality. But every step brought only more silence. No footprints, no broken boards, no whispering. Only the sound of my own breathing, loud in the quiet night. I felt watched. That same feeling from before, A presence somewhere at the edge of my perception. I spun the flashlight, beams cutting across the trees, onto the road. Nothing. Not a shadow, not a hint of life. And yet, my stomach churned with certainty. Something had been here. And I knew, deep down, that something still was. I walked back to the cruiser, unsure if I wanted to leave or stay. The house had vanished, disappeared as if it had never been. And yet, the impressions of it, the scent of dust and ash, the heat from the fire, the faint whispering, I carried them inside me. I could still hear them, just beneath the edge of hearing, as if my mind refused to let go. I sat in the cruiser, keys in hand, debating what to do next. My phone buzzed with a message from dispatch. Please check in when you are able. Everything in your area shows as vacant. I felt my chest tighten. Vacant, I whispered aloud. Vacant, empty, nothing. And yet, the sense of being followed, of being observed, lingered. It wasn't gone. It never left. I drove slowly, eyes scanning the tree-line. The road was empty, the fog receding. But every time I glanced at the edge of the road, I felt it, movement, just a shift in the shadows, a dark shape standing slightly apart from the trees. I couldn't be sure it was real, but I didn't want to test it. I didn't want to see. I kept driving. The cruiser's headlights cut through the night. The house did not reappear. And yet, every mile felt like walking through the same hallway again, a place I'd already seen, already feared. I kept checking the rearview mirror, expecting to see a shadow standing on the road behind me. Nothing, but the feeling persisted. Heavy, suffocating, unyielding. When I finally reached the main highway, I called the station again. 214 to dispatch. I'm back on the main road. No structure. No, nothing. Coordinates confirmed. Can someone verify this? The voice came back, calm, neutral, clinical. 214, coordinates show an empty clearing. Nothing recorded. Are you experiencing any health issues? Any dizziness or disorientation? No. I snapped, voice shaking. Nothing. I was inside a house. There was someone or something. I saw it. The line went silent again, then 214 will send a unit to check. Please remain on the main road. Will advise. I hung up, heart racing, hand shaking. I knew the truth. Dispatch would find nothing. They would see nothing. The house had disappeared, erased itself from existence, leaving only the residue of fear and memory behind. And I knew, somewhere beyond the edge of reason, that it had chosen to reveal itself to me and no one else. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I patrolled the roads, lights sweeping the dark, alert to every movement. The memory of the footprints, the fire, the carefully arranged furniture, and the faint whispers refused to leave. I caught myself glancing at every shadow, every tree, expecting the house or the figure to appear again. It never did, but I felt it, always, in the corner of my mind, waiting, watching, measuring. By the time the sun rose, I was exhausted, hollowed out, and trembling. I reported in, trying to sound calm, professional. I didn't tell anyone the truth. How could I? The house had vanished. The call never existed. And if I did tell, who would believe me? Even now, I can't shake it. The memory is burned into me, vivid and unyielding. I can close my eyes and see the front porch, hear the soft whispering, feel the warmth of the fire and the cold of the air at once. I can recall the footprints leading nowhere, the furniture arranged as if someone had planned my arrival. And I know this. The house is still out there, somewhere, waiting, choosing, watching. And the next time, it may not be so easy to leave. I was never supposed to go through another officer's body cam footage. Not alone, not at this hour. But the missing person report on Officer Callahan had sat on my desk for days, and the curiosity, I'll admit it, was stronger than caution. I wanted to know why he'd vanished, where he'd gone, and maybe, just maybe, if there was something in those files that could explain it, I could prepare myself for whatever lurked in the back roads after midnight. The department server still held his last shift, labeled in Callahan's precise handwriting. Night Patrol, Cedar Ridge. I logged in, my badge clipped to my belt, the dim glow of my computer screen reflecting in the dark room. The first file opened like any other. Static, greenish hues. The timestamp flickering across the corner. Callahan's voice greeted me softly, calm and professional. 2:14, Cedar Ridge check-in, 1900 hours. I leaned closer. The footage was grainy, corrupted in sections. Brief flashes of static that scrambled the visuals for seconds, sometimes longer. But between the glitches, I could see him, walking down the gravel road. Flashlight cutting arcs through the darkness. Cruiser parked behind him. Everything normal. Everything safe. Then the first oddity. He paused in the middle of the road, head tilted slightly as if listening. The audio warped, but I caught a whisper, soft, almost inaudible. "Did you hear that?" Callahan muttered, to no one in particular. The camera wobbled slightly, his hand adjusting the mic. I rewound the segment several times, trying to catch the sound again, but all I heard was the faint hum of the night. I told myself it was just the wind or the radio signal cracking, but I couldn't shake the feeling, even now, that it was something else, something that had been there all along, hiding in the darkness, waiting for him to notice. Minutes passed. Callahan moved toward the tree line, flashlight sweeping between gnarled trunks. I saw him crouch suddenly, camera tilting to the side, as if he'd spotted something at the edge of the woods. A shadow flickered across the view. Not a person, not a deer, nothing that made sense. But it moved too fast to be a trick of the wind. 214, what the hell? He whispered, voice trembling. The footage crackled. The image distorted for a full 7 seconds. When it returned, he was standing upright, breathing hard, scanning the area with that same careful, methodical posture. And then he whispered again, "It's following." I paused the video, heart hammering. My hand shook. I felt the same tension in my chest that I imagined he'd felt walking through that night. There was no one there, at least none that I could see. But the fear in his tone, the stiffness in his movements, told me he knew something was there, something unseen. I pressed play. Callahan continued down the gravel, approaching a clearing. The camera bobbed with every step, catching glimpses of the underbrush and the glimmer of his flashlight on wet leaves. And then, the first full corruption file. The screen went green and static Y for nearly 15 seconds. When it returned, Callahan was farther along, as if the footage had skipped time. I frowned, scrolling back, replaying. No skip frames, no edits. Just corrupted segments that seemed to rearrange themselves. A sound came through, faint but distinct. Something like a scraping across concrete. Not far off, but not close either. Callahan froze. His head turned sharply, the camera swinging violently to follow him. A shadow passed across the clearing. I froze, too, gripping my desk. "Who's there?" he called. His voice was low, cautious. A whisper answered him, but it wasn't his. Not exactly. It was distorted, electronic, almost like the radio interference you hear when a signal is weak, but words formed. The single phrase repeated over and over. "Come closer, come closer." I rewound and listened again. My stomach turned. The voice wasn't natural. It was somewhere between a human tone and the static itself. The whisper crawled under my skin, slow, deliberate, patient. Callahan turned the camera back toward the road, muttering, "I'm not alone. I'm not alone." The static returned, longer this time. When the image cleared, the camera pointed at the ground. Footsteps, not his. Small, quick, deliberate, circling him, cutting through the gravel and leaves, moving around him. He turned sharply. Stop moving." Nothing appeared on the footage, but the sounds were undeniable. Scrapes, shifts, light thuds. The kind of thing you hear when someone or something is just beyond the reach of light. I felt it in my own chest. That low, crawling dread, the sensation of eyes tracking you from beyond the frame. My office, my building, my desk, it felt like it was filled with unseen watchers. I told myself it was the footage, that it wasn't real, that it was just a video. But the footage was doing something to me, something I couldn't name. Callahan's breathing grew heavier. He moved toward the cruiser again, crouching behind the open door. The shadow flickered again, faster this time, at the edge of the headlights. Then he dropped the camera, The footage jerked violently, spinning, static overwhelming the image for 20 seconds. When it returned, he was on the ground, panting, shaking, and then he whispered the words I will never forget. There in the car, my hand gripped the edge of the desk. The same dread clawed at me. I rewound footage. Nothing. A misplaced shadow? A trick of the light? I shook my head. No. The whisper. The scraping. The movement. Something had been there, and Callahan had known it. The rest of the footage degraded further. Every few minutes, the image broke into static. Sometimes he moved. Sometimes the camera pointed at the sky, at the trees, at the ground. And always the faint sound of movement. Always a sense of presence. Sometimes it whispered. Sometimes it laughed. Not human laughter. Not real laughter. But a warped, dry sound that made the hair on my neck stand on end. I didn't stop watching. I couldn't. My pulse pounded in my ears. I told myself I was preparing, studying, learning what had happened. But the truth was simpler. I was terrified, and I was drawn to it. Then the final segment. The camera pointed forward, down the road. There was movement in the periphery. A tall shape, featureless, leaning slightly, just at the edge of light. Callahan whispered, barely audible, I can't see." The static returned. Then one final message. A distorted, barely audible phrase, repeated over and over. "You shouldn't have come back." The footage cut to black. No sound. No movement. I sat back, hands shaking, staring at the dark screen. My office felt colder. The shadows at the corners of the room felt too thick, too present. And in that moment, I understood whatever had taken Callahan, whatever had been following him, had left a mark, not just on him, not just on the night, but on me. I saved the corrupted files to a flash drive. I don't know why. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was foolish curiosity. But I had to keep them. I had to see them again, to understand, and I knew, deep down, that I would, because the presence wasn't gone. It had followed me. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear it, scraping, whispering, circling, waiting. And I knew the night would come again, and it would find me, just as it had found Callahan. I told myself I was ready to watch the rest of Callahan's footage. I told myself I was prepared for the usual anomalies, the glitches, the static, the grainy image of a man alone in the dark. But I wasn't ready, not even close. The moment I pressed play, the footage started normally enough. Gravel crunching under boots, the faint hum of the cruiser's engine, Callahan muttering check-ins over the radio. The road stretched into darkness ahead, lined with trees that bent under the weight of the night. Every detail was exactly as it should have been, until it wasn't. A shadow flickered. At first, I thought it was the tree limbs moving with the wind, but no, this was different. The shadow had shape, a long, leaning figure, thin, moving in a way that no human should be able to. It slipped between the trees, just at the edge of Callahan's flashlight. I froze, hands gripping my desk. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a deer, maybe a trick of the light. But the movement was deliberate, smooth, calculated, and it wasn't natural. Then came the whispers. At first, I couldn't tell where they were coming from. Low, airy, almost swallowed by the static. I leaned in. Callahan's own voice was calm at first, checking the road, scanning the woods. And beneath it, faint, almost inaudible, came words that twisted my stomach. "Why are you here?" I froze. I rewound. I played again. My heart thudded in my chest. That voice, it wasn't Callahan. Not really. It was hollow, drawn out, as if the night itself had learned to speak. It whispered again, just for a moment, then vanished into the crackle of the static. Callahan's steps faltered. His breathing grew heavier. He muttered something under his breath. A warning to himself, I think. The camera jerked with his motion. The shadow moved closer, but never fully into view, always just at the edge of the light, just beyond the clarity of the lens. It was waiting for him to notice, and when he did, it recoiled, but not in the way a normal thing would. More like it remembered something it had to hide. The whispering returned. "I see you. I see you." This time it followed him, echoing over the rustle of leaves, the scrape of boots on gravel. My stomach twisted. I leaned back, trying to tell myself I was safe. I wasn't there. I was just watching. But the sense of presence wasn't on the screen. It was in the room with me. Something about the footage, something about the way the camera captured the night, made it feel like it had followed me home. Callahan stopped. The camera swung to the side, catching a glimpse of the shadows along the roadside. They weren't human. They were thin, elongated, as if the darkness itself had decided to stretch and form shapes. I could see movement in them, but not the kind of movement that made sense. Twisting, bending, crawling across the edge of the frame like water, and the whispers, low, repeating, patient. Do you see me? Do you see me? Callahan's voice cracked as he whispered, "Stay back." The camera trembled as he turned his flashlight toward the darkness. Nothing, just trees, just the night, but the static worked, stretching the shadows in impossible directions. I could almost feel their weight pressing against the edges of the screen. I had to pause it. My hands were trembling, my chest tight. I told myself I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't hallucinating. This was a video. But then I realized something worse. The audio track had begun to shift independently of the visuals. The whispers weren't always in sync with Callahan's movements. Sometimes they came before the shadow appeared. Sometimes after, it was as if the night was anticipating him, as if it had learned how to manipulate the footage, how to warp reality into something to control. I pressed play again. Callahan had reached a clearing, the flashlight slicing through the fog that had crept in. The ground was damp, leaves sticking to his boots. And there, in the center of the clearing, the shadows had gathered. Not many, just a handful, thin and impossible. They swayed gently, not blown by wind, not tethered to any natural law I could identify. The whispers rose in intensity, overlapping, layering, forming words I could almost understand. Come closer, come closer. Callahan froze. The camera jostled as he crouched, scanning. I could see the fear in him, even in grainy footage. His hand shook as he reached for his radio. No response. Dead static. The whispers seemed to grow louder in contrast, filling the silence, pressing into the gaps between corrupted frames. I rewound, then played. I had to see it again. I had to hear it again. The whispers were clearer now, almost teasing. A pattern, a rhythm, and in that rhythm, I could feel the intent behind them. Malevolent, patient, waiting for him to falter. And then the figure stepped forward. Or at least, what I thought was a figure. It loomed, its shape stretching unnaturally, its form bending like it shouldn't be possible. The shadows and the clearing followed it, slithering along the ground, curling upward. Callahan's flashlight trembled in his grip. He whispered again, voice shaking, "Get away." The figure paused. Nothing else moved. The silence was absolute, broken only by the distorted static and faint rustle. And then Callahan's own shadow on the ground began to move differently than his body. A momentary mismatch, just long enough for me to see it. My stomach dropped. I couldn't breathe. His shadow twisted toward the taller figure, as if acknowledging it. The whispers grew sharper, faster, almost urgent. "Join us, join us." Callahan spun, pointing his flashlight. The camera wobbled. And there, for one heartbeat, I saw it. A face? Not human, not fully formed, as if carved from darkness, faintly outlined against the night. Then gone with the static. I had to stop. I had to breathe. My hands were shaking. My chest hurt. But I pressed play again. Against my better judgment, I couldn't stop. Something was happening here. Something real. Something that defied explanation. Callahan moved again, back toward the road, away from the clearing. His movements were jerky, cautious. The shadows didn't follow at first. They lingered at the edge, bending and twisting in ways that made my head ache to watch. And then, as if understanding the limits of the footage, they began to follow, through trees, through gaps in the fog, almost impossibly fast. The whispers now spoke in multiple voices, overlapping, echoing, filling every inch of audio with a buzzing tension. You can't hide, you can't hide. Callahan's breath was ragged. He stumbled. The camera tipped. The shadow lurked impossible at the edge, waiting. The whispers grew louder as if responding to him, reacting. I could feel my own pulse racing. I could feel it watching me. Not the video, not Callahan. Something behind the video, in the static, in the shadows, watching me. Finally, the camera dropped. Static overtook everything. For a long moment, all I could see was green noise, the kind that scratches at your brain when you stare too long. Then brief glimpses returned. Callahan was gone. The road was empty. Only shadows remained, stretching and bending in impossible ways. The whispers ended abruptly, leaving a ringing silence. I sat back. My heart was hammering. My palms were slicked with sweat. The footage was still running, looping through static and corrupted frames. And somewhere in the middle of it, I realized the shadows, the whispers, the presence, they weren't bound to the night. They weren't bound to Callahan. They were bound to the camera, bound to the recording, bound to whoever dared watch. I shut my eyes. I told myself I was imagining it, but when I opened them again, the office felt darker, thicker, heavier. The shadows and corners of the room seemed to shift just slightly, as if testing their limits. And I knew, without a doubt, that they had followed me here. I didn't touch the footage again that night. I didn't sleep. I just sat there, staring at the static, listening for the whispers that never came. But I knew they were waiting, patient, hungry, and that the next time I pressed play, they would speak to me directly. I didn't know how long I stood there, staring at the grainy screen, trying to convince myself it was just a coincidence. The footage, corrupted and warped, had been repeating for hours, yet something about the frames twisted my stomach into knots I couldn't untangle. Then I noticed it. Something so subtle that at first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. The hallway. It was the same hallway I had walked through this evening in the station's back wing. The peeling paint, the flickering fluorescent light, the cracked tile floor, all identical. I could see the tiny dent on the corner of the doorframe, the scuff marks along the baseboards where a mop had slid countless times. Every detail of the footage matched reality, and yet, in the recording, Callahan, or whoever he was moving through it hours ago, or yesterday, or sometime I could no longer place. I swallowed hard. My voice caught when I whispered, "This can't be real." The camera jerked as the man, Callahan, I still told myself, walked down the hallway. His footsteps echoed in the footage, the same hollow echo that bounced off these very walls around me. I could almost hear the sound in my own ears, the faint drag of his boots scratching the floor tiles, the soft rattle of keys or metal against metal. I stepped forward. I had to know. I had to see if it was possible. My own footsteps synchronized almost exactly with the man on the screen, and that's when I noticed it. The shadow, a long, thin shadow trailing him, but never fully visible, curling at the edges, slipping along the walls as if the building itself had taken shape around it. I stopped mid-step. The shadow didn't stop. It flowed forward, stretching toward me, clinging to the corners of my vision. My chest tightened. I had to breathe. I leaned against the wall. My fingers brushed the chipped paint, cold and rough. Just like in the footage, I could smell the faint scent of mildew, of old carpet, the kind that seeps into your clothes and hair after hours of neglect. And then I heard it, the whispering. At first, it was faint, barely more than a static hiss. But as I focused, it became words. Low, deliberate enough that my stomach dropped into my boots. "You shouldn't be here." I froze. My fingers were pressed against the wall, and the longer I stood, the heavier the air became. The whispers didn't sound like Callahan's voice. Not exactly. They sounded like a chorus of shadows, voices layered over each other, speaking just beyond the edge of comprehension. They knew I was here. They knew I was watching the footage. The camera and the recording swung slightly, catching the end of the hallway. The man paused, his head tilted, listening, sensing something I couldn't yet name, and then slowly he walked toward me, or at least toward where I stood now. I swallowed, forcing my legs to move backward, but the hallway seemed longer than it should be. Every step I took felt heavier, as if the building itself resisted me. The fluorescent lights flickered, throwing the hallway into darkness and back again. The shadows and the footage moved with it, stretching, contorting in ways that defied reality. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was just the angle of the camera. Maybe the hallway had changed over time. But no, every detail matched perfectly. Every scuff, every mark, every flickering light. It was the same hallway, and yet the footage was old. Or was it? The whispers grew louder. I could almost understand them now. Fragments forming sentences in my mind. Follow, you could not leave, watch. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. I couldn't move. I wanted to call out, but my throat was dry, tight, as if the air itself had thickened. The man in the footage reached the far end of the hallway and paused. His shadow, elongated, impossible, swirled on the floor beneath him, and then it lifted as if it had weight and stretched toward the camera. Toward me. I stumbled backward, my hand scraping along the wall. The flickering light caught on something. Something not in the footage. A figure? No, too vague. Just a mass of darkness, moving independently, sliding along the floor tiles. And the whispers. You can see me. Now you belong. I backed into a doorway, my hands trembling, sweat running down my neck. The footage was still playing. The man's figure mirrored me almost exactly, step for step. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at me, or perhaps through me, and the shadows behind him were thicker, denser than anything a camera could capture. I could almost feel them pressing against my skin. I wanted to stop watching. I wanted to turn it off, but my hands, against my will, reached forward. My fingers brushed the desk where my laptop sat. The whispers seemed to follow the movement, twisting, curling, filling my mind with static pressure. Then it happened. The figure on the screen stopped, and for the first time, it turned its head. Its face wasn't clear, not fully, but it was enough. Eyes hollow, dark, as if carved from the hallway itself. Its mouth open, and I could hear the words even before the audio caught up, as if they were spoken inside my head. You can't leave? I stumbled back, nearly falling. And when I looked down the hallway again, it wasn't just a screen anymore. The hallway behind me stretched longer than I remembered. Shadows pulled in the corners, pulling unnaturally, reaching for the light. I could hear movement behind me. Soft, scraping, deliberate. I spun, heart hammering. The hallway was empty. My office, the station, empty. But the sensation remained. Something had shifted. The footage had blurred the line between what was recorded and what was present. And I realized with a sudden cold certainty, the hallway wasn't just in the footage anymore. It existed here, with me. I couldn't explain it, couldn't rationalize it. Every logical part of my brain screamed for me to run, to shut everything down, to call someone. But the whispers followed, pressing closer, layering over themselves, repeating, "Follow, don't leave, stay." I stumbled backward again, brushing the wall with my palm. The hallway behind me seemed to stretch, the end receding like a trick of perspective I couldn't comprehend. The figure in the footage moved again, deliberately, step by step, its shadow stretching impossibly behind it, curling like smoke along the floor. Each step echoed in my chest. Each whisper echoed in my mind. I could feel it then, the pressure of it, the sense that the hallway itself was watching, that every movement, every breath I took was recorded and mirrored, layer upon layer, into something I could not touch. And I realized what the footage had been all along, not a recording of the past, not a memory of Callahan, but a doorway, a place where the shadows waited, patient, until someone saw, until someone mirrored the steps. My hands shook. I wanted to look away, wanted to close the laptop, wanted to erase the footage from existence. But I couldn't. Something in me was drawn forward, compelled to see the next frame, to witness the next step. The man in the hallway moved toward the camera. His shadow stretched across the tile floor, reaching, curling, waiting. I whispered a warning to myself, trembling, don't do it. But then the whisper came again, not from the footage, not from the speakers, but from the corners of the hallway behind me. You already are. I fell backward, hitting the wall, the desk, anything to put distance between me and the screen. The hallway in the footage, my hallway, stretched endlessly. The figure moved closer. The shadows swirled behind it. And for the first time, I felt it. The touch of presence, not a breeze, not an echo, but the sense of something living just beyond the screen, waiting for me to step closer. The whispers grew frantic, overlapping, cascading in waves of incomprehensible sound. Stay, follow, belong, see. And in that moment, I knew the footage didn't end. It couldn't. It wasn't recording anymore. It was happening. Even now, right in this station, right in this hallway, and I had walked straight into it. Unaware, unprepared. I pressed my hands against the wall. I tried to take a breath. The hallway behind me seemed to stretch impossibly long. The shadows pulled and twisted, and the whispers, they were inside my head now. See, you can't leave. I closed my eyes, heart hammering, trying to convince myself it was imagination, but the sensation remained. The floor tiles beneath my feet seemed to shift subtly, just enough for me to feel it. The shadows in the corners pulled, waiting, patient. And somewhere, far ahead in the footage, the figure in the hallway continued walking toward the camera, toward me. I knew, even as my mind screamed to stop, even as every rational thought fled, that I could not leave, that I could not escape, that the same hallway, the same shadows, the same whispers would follow me as long as I kept watching. And I could hear it, clearer than ever. Welcome to the hallway, welcome. I couldn't stop watching. Every night. I told myself I'd just glance at the footage, just enough to figure out what I was seeing. But it had a way of pulling me in, a gravity I couldn't resist. And tonight was no different. Except this time, I realized the footage wasn't just old recordings. It was me. The hallway appeared again, the same peeling paint, the same flickering lights. At first, I thought it was the same loop clip from before, but as I watched, I saw my own uniformed figure walking down the hall. My boots, the exact same worn soles, scuffed in the exact same spots as mine. My flashlight beam swinging slightly, the way I held it when I was tired from a long shift. It was me, and yet it wasn't. I leaned closer, my stomach twisting. My hand hovered over the mouse, but I couldn't turn it off. The figure steps were off by fractions a second, just enough that my heartbeat accelerated. I was mirroring the footage without realizing it. Every twitch of the wrist, every glance, every shallow breath seemed coordinated, but the figure's head tilted slightly in ways I hadn't. Its shadows stretched differently along the walls, curling in impossible angles. I whispered, more to myself than anyone else, "This isn't possible." And then I saw it, the first small difference. My flashlight beam caught a crack in the tile, one I had never noticed, but in the footage, the crack was wider, darker, as if it had been slowly decaying while I hadn't looked. The walls were slightly grimier, the flicker of light just a fraction slower. I could feel a creeping chill in my bones, the way a storm presses down before it breaks. I stepped back from the laptop. My own office seemed smaller now, the shadows stretching longer than they should. But the screen kept playing, and the figure, my figure, continued down the hall. And then it paused. It looked over its shoulder, not directly at the camera, not at me, but somehow both. Its face was obscured, but the tilt of its head, the stillness in its posture made my stomach drop. And then I realized it wasn't alone. A shadow lingered just beyond the beam of the flashlight, dark, curling, impossible. I could see it stretch along the walls, writhing in ways that defied reality. It mimicked me, but not perfectly. Its movements lagged behind mine, slow and deliberate, as if studying me, testing me. I swallowed hard. My voice caught when I tried to speak aloud. "Who's there?" I whispered. The office swallowed my words. Only the faint hum of the fluorescent light responded. I turned slightly in my chair. Nothing, just the peeling paint and scattered folders. But my reflection in the darkened window across the room looked wrong. My shoulders slumped differently. My head tilted at an angle I had never adopted. And the whisper came, barely audible at first, curling around the edges of my mind. Follow. I jerked back. My heart was hammering. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was the audio glitching again. Maybe my brain was playing tricks after hours of being alone on shift, but the footage continued and my figure, moved closer to the end of the hallway, and it wasn't walking the way I would. Its steps were heavier, slower, as if weighing something I couldn't see. And then the second difference. In the footage, I passed a door that in reality didn't exist. The walls were continuous, the hallway unbroken in my office. But in the recording, a heavy wooden door appeared, slightly ajar, light spilling from the edges. My stomach churned as I realized I could feel its presence now, not through my eyes, but through my chest, as if the room itself had grown larger to accommodate it. I leaned closer to the screen again. I had to know. I had to see. My fingers hovered over the keys. Shaking, the figure's shadow twisted along the walls in ways that my shadow could not mimic. It lingered, scraping along the floor like it had weight, curling around corners, disappearing and reappearing. The whispers grew louder, almost synchronized with the figure's steps in the footage. Words forming, clear enough to make my hair stand on end. Don't turn away, don't leave, follow. I realized that the figure was leading me somewhere, or maybe I was leading it. I couldn't tell which. Every movement I made, every twitch of my wrist, every glance down the hall was mirrored and distorted in the footage. And the longer I watched, the more I felt the pull, not just to the screen, but to the hallway itself. The door in the footage opened wider. I could see nothing inside, just darkness, but it moved, slowly, as if something or someone inside was aware I was watching. My stomach dropped. I could feel the cold touch of anticipation, like a breeze brushing along my neck. Even though I was alone, I backed away, shaking. My hands grasped the edge of the desk. The figure, my figure, moved through the doorway, and the shadow followed, stretching impossibly long, curling along the floor and walls, slipping into corners, disappearing and returning. I realized with a jolt that my heartbeat was syncing with the steps in the footage, slow, heavy, dragging. Every time the figure stepped forward, I felt a pull in my chest, as if my body wanted to follow without my consent. I tried to look away, tried to shut the laptop, but the pull was stronger than my fear, stronger than my reason. The figure walked to the doorway, and for the first time, I saw the faintest outline of a hand emerge from the shadow. A thin, elongated hand, reaching, curling, as if waiting for me to step closer. The whisper came again, louder this time, not from the speakers, but from inside my head. Step forward, follow join. I gasped, my hands trembled. I wanted to run, wanted to leave the office, wanted to destroy the footage, but my body froze. I couldn't look away. And then I saw it, the third difference. The figure's face was faintly visible now. Not clear, but enough to recognize something wrong. The eyes were empty, hollow, reflecting nothing, yet somehow watching everything. The mouth moved in subtle ways that I hadn't seen before, whispering something I couldn't hear aloud, but felt in my chest. You follow step, repeat. My breath caught. My knees went weak. The office felt smaller, the walls closing in. The hallway and the footage stretched endlessly, impossible, yet familiar. And I understood this wasn't just a recording. This was a loop, a trap, a mirror of my own patrol, but twisted. Every difference, every shadow, every whisper was a warning, or maybe a lure. I stood abruptly, knocking over my chair. My hands shook violently. The whispers became a roar, overlapping, indistinct, but insistent. Follow, follow, follow. I stumbled backward, my back hitting the wall. The laptop screen flickered. The figure paused in the doorway. And in that pause, I saw it fully. The shadow behind it, massive, curling, impossibly long, moving independently of the figure, stretching toward me, watching me, waiting. I could feel it then, the pull in my chest, the tug of inevitability. The footage was no longer a recording. It was a reflection, a loop, a call. And the longer I looked, the more I realized the truth. Every patrol I had ever done, every step I had ever taken, could be mirrored, twisted, trapped, and now it was my turn to be repeated. I fell to my knees, gasping. My hands covered my face. The whispers crawled through my mind, relentless. Follow, repeat, step, never leave. I dared to peek. My figure, was still in the doorway. Its shadow stretched across the hallway in ways that made my blood run cold. Every detail was the same, and yet everything was wrong. The differences were subtle, but they were there, deliberate. And I knew, with a sinking certainty, that if I took another step, if I moved forward even slightly, I would be drawn into that loop. The shadow would consume me. The whispers would follow me forever. And the last thing I saw before I stumbled away, shaking, was the figure's head tilt. Its hollow eyes bore into me through the screen, through the shadows, through the hallway itself. And the faintest, slowest whisper reached my ears. Even though no one was there, step forward, the path awaits, follow. I stumbled backward, hands trembling, heart racing, realizing with every fiber of my being that the footage wasn't just repeating me. It was teaching me to repeat, teaching me to walk a path I hadn't chosen, a path I could never leave. And I knew, somehow, that the next time I looked, the hallway would be closer, the figure would be closer, and I would be closer stepping forward into the shadows that waited, patient, endless, and inevitable. The station was quieter than usual, almost empty. Even for a night shift, it felt like the kind of silence that presses against your ears until you start hearing things that aren't there. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead buzzed steadily, and my own footsteps echoed too loudly on the linoleum floor as I walked from the coffee machine back to the front desk. I settled into the chair, tried to ignore the ache in my lower back, the kind that comes from sitting under harsh lights, waiting for nothing to happen. Most nights were slow, routine reports, a few stray calls, the occasional panicked driver or lost teenager. Tonight, though, it felt heavier, like the air itself had grown dense. The first walk-in arrived around midnight. A man, hunched over, eyes darting. He said his car had broken down a few miles down the highway and he'd been trying to flag someone down. But it was too late by the time he made it to the station. He rattled off his story quickly, like he was afraid the shadows might hear him. I took notes, nodded, smiled when I could, kept the conversation going just enough to reassure him that someone was listening. After he left, the station swallowed the quiet again. I looked around, the empty hallways stretching farther than usual under the flickering lights. It was the kind of emptiness that feels watched. I shook it off. My imagination was probably just running wild. That's what nights like this do to you. Minutes dragged. I tried to catch up on paperwork, flipping through incident reports from the past few weeks. Routine stuff, fender benders, false alarms, missing pets. Nothing unusual. But then I noticed something odd. A report I didn't remember filing. The handwriting wasn't mine exactly. It looked like mine, but sloppier, shakier. And the address, I couldn't place it. I didn't recognize it. Not in any town I knew. I set the paper down, feeling a cold prickle run along my spine. Probably a mix-up. Old report misfiled. My brain tried to rationalize, but wouldn't let go of the unease curling in my gut. Hours passed. Another walk-in, a woman this time. She said she'd been hearing noises outside her house for weeks. Footsteps, scratching on the windows. I asked for details, the usual protocol. But the more she described it, the tighter my chest felt. The noises she described, they sounded familiar, like something I had heard just recently on another call, but I couldn't remember where. I didn't mention it, just kept taking notes, offering reassurances I didn't feel. After she left, the shadows seemed to stretch longer across the hallways. The fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered, making the corners of the station feel deeper, darker. I sipped cold coffee, trying to steady my breathing, tried to convince myself it was just exhaustion, and then the radio crackled, static, low and thick. I froze, staring at it. The station's radio rarely picked up anything on this channel at night. Most of the time it was dead. But tonight, something came through. A voice, faint, hesitant. Copy over? I frowned. It was distant, broken, almost underwater. But it was clear enough to make my skin crawl. I pressed the microphone. This is dispatch. Identify yourself. No response. Just a static, then another snippet. Traffic, westbound unit. 44, repeat. I felt the hair on my neck stand up. Unit 44? There was no active Unit 44 on patrol tonight. It didn't exist. Not in the records, not in the assignments. My hand trembled slightly as I tapped the mic again. Unit 44, come in. This is dispatch. Please respond. More static, and then a whisper, low and hurried. Don't follow. I dropped the mic, heart hammering. The station felt smaller all at once. Corners crowding in. My stomach twisted. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was probably some prank, a transmission from a long-retired scanner picking up old frequencies. But the voice had sounded so real, so close. I sat back in chair, rubbing my eyes. Maybe it was fatigue. Maybe I was imagining things. But the next call confirmed neither of those possibilities. A young man walked in, eyes wide, hand shaking. He said he had been driving along the old county road when he saw a figure standing in the middle of the highway. He swore it disappeared when he got close. His story was fragmented, but the words repeated themselves in a rhythm I recognized. Footsteps, shadows, disappearing. I couldn't stop thinking about the faint whisper over the radio. Don't follow. I tried to focus on paperwork, but the shadows of the hallways stretched again. They felt alive, creeping toward me in the corners of my vision. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. I could hear every mechanical click, every buzz from the lights above. By 2 a.m., the station was silent again. The young man had left, the woman too, the first man as well. But the radio crackled once more, louder this time, carrying a fragment of conversation I had no memory of. Unit 44, Highway 12, witness missing. My hand froze over the microphone. Highway 12. That stretch of road had been quiet tonight. No patrols, no calls. And yet, the voice was reporting something, someone. I leaned back, feeling the weight of the empty station pressing down. The silence was no longer neutral. It was oppressive. Every squeak of the floorboards, every distant hum, every flicker of the fluorescent lights became a threat. I could feel my pulse in my temples, hear my heartbeat in my throat. And then I noticed it. Something moving just at the edge of my vision, a shadow flickering in the corner of the room. I turned quickly. Nothing, just the peeling paint and the empty hallways. My eyes darted to the radio. Silence, the hum of the lights, my own ragged breathing. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination. Night shifts played tricks. Shadows stretched. My mind filled in blanks. But the feeling lingered. Something had been watching me. Waiting. I stood, pacing the small office, trying to shake the sense of being followed. Every step echoed too loudly. I glanced at the cameras, the little boxes perched in the corners of the station. They hummed silently, unblinking. Nothing appeared on the monitors, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being observed. Not by a person, but by something else. Hours dragged toward dawn. The station remained empty. My notes were finished. The walk-ins gone, yet the unease wouldn't leave. The radio crackled one last time before the morning shift arrived. A single word, barely audible. Here, I froze, staring at the device. My coffee had gone cold. My fingers trembled. The shadows in the corners seemed to lean closer, curling at the edges of the office. I sat, staring at the door, waiting for someone to come through, knowing that even if they did, it wouldn't change what I had heard. When the morning shift arrived, bright and cheerful, I didn't mention the radio. I didn't tell them about the shadows. I didn't mention the whispers or the empty Unit 44, because if I did, they would think I was crazy. And maybe I was, but I knew what I had heard. I knew what I had felt. And every night since, I've waited, wondering when the voice would return and what it would want next. Because in the empty silence of the station, the night isn't just quiet, it's listening. And sometimes it speaks. Night shifts are strange in their own right. Quiet, yes, but in that quiet there's a rhythm, a cadence you come to rely on. You notice the little things, the way the fluorescent lights hum, the way the air conditioner flickers on and off, the faint scuff of shoes in the hall long before anyone appears. That's why, the first time I saw him, I noticed everything. He wasn't someone I recognized, not a driver, not a regular. Just there, sitting at the walk-in counter. Pale like the station lights themselves had leached the color from him. Shoulders hunched, hands folded neatly over a thin manila folder. His hair was too black, too slick, like he'd combed it for a funeral. His eyes were dark rings, too still to be human. They didn't move as you expected. They didn't blink the way people blink. Evening, I sat cautiously, standing from my chair. My voice sounded louder than usual in the empty office. He didn't respond. Not at first. Just watched. Waiting. I can help you with something. I asked, keeping my tone professional. My instinct screamed at me that he shouldn't be here. That something about him wasn't right. But the station rules are rules. I can't just ask someone to leave without cause. Finally, he spoke. Soft, flat, almost rehearsed. I'm here to file a report, he said. And then he handed me the folder. I glanced down. The first name made me freeze. Cold, nausea twisting my stomach. The name was familiar, too familiar. A local man who had died 6 weeks ago. Car accident on the highway. The death had been confirmed. The body recovered. The obituary printed. I blinked, hoping it was some kind of clerical joke, a mistake. Sir, I said slowly, this man, he's dead. We filed a report months ago. There's nothing left to file. He looked at me then. Finally really looked. Those eyes so dark and unblinking seemed to see past me, past the counter, past the walls themselves. He's missing, the man said. Soft, deliberate, and I must report him. I swallowed. Something in my chest tightened, like a fist had wrapped around my lungs. You're filing reports for people who are dead? I filed a report when the world forgets, he said. Flat, matter of fact, like it was ordinary. I wanted to ask more, but the next name made my blood run cold. Another man, 2 counties over, also dead, also confirmed death. I flipped through the folder. More names, all dead, and for each, the dates on the folder indicated the report had been filed the day before. Yesterday, last week, every month. He came in with the same pale folder, the same stack of names, each already gone. I stepped back, suddenly aware of the weight in the room. The hum of the fluorescent lights no longer felt ordinary. The shadows gathered near the corners, as though listening, leaning closer. Why are you doing this? My voice barely above a whisper. He tilted his head slightly. Because someone must remember, even if the world denies it, even if they deny it themselves. I couldn't look away. Something about him felt impossible. Like a man, but not entirely. Like a reflection that had somehow stepped into the real world. I tried to rationalize. Maybe he was mentally ill. Maybe he had access to some private records I didn't know about. Maybe he was lying. Maybe, but my instinct screamed at me that none of those explanations were enough. He didn't move. He didn't breathe the way I do. Yet there was motion. In the paper. In the way the names shifted slightly as I stared. Like the words were alive. I shook my head, trying to dispel the rising panic. Sir, you can't. I started again, but he interrupted me. I've been filing these for years. Every month, every shift, every name that dies. I bring here. The world forgets, but I do not. I leaned against the counter, trying to steady my breathing. My mind was spinning. How long had he been doing this? Why me? Why the station? Did you know them? I asked cautiously. Some, he said, flat matter of fact. Some I have watched. Some I have loved. Some I have only known by death certificates and obituaries. It does not matter. They are gone, but they still exist here, in the report, in memory. He tapped the folder, lightly, like a heartbeat. I realized then that I wasn't afraid of him. Not exactly. I was afraid of what he represented. The quiet persistence of death. The refusal to let go. The way he existed in a space I didn't understand, moving through time differently than I did. Keeping accounts I was too limited to perceive. Did you live somewhere? Do you sleep? My voice cracked slightly. He smiled then, just slightly. Too slow, too knowing. It wasn't a smile that reached the eyes. I am here. I have always been here. And when I leave, I am still here. Do not worry about me. I wanted to tell him to leave. Wanted to insist that this wasn't normal. That the station had rules. but my voice failed. I could barely move. My hands shook as I touched the counter. He stood then, slowly, methodically. The shadows seemed to gather around him, stretching longer as if the lights themselves were afraid to touch him. He didn't walk to the door. He simply moved toward the edge of perception, like he was slipping through the gaps between reality and memory. "I will return," he said, whispered, but it reverberated in the walls. "And I will continue. They will never be forgotten. Even when you forget them, I will not." And then he was gone. The room felt smaller after he left. The lights buzzed in a higher pitch. My ears rang. I tried to breathe, but the air felt thick, like it was holding its own weight against me. I picked up the folder he left behind. I flipped through it again, names glaring up at me. Dead people, missing people, impossible claims that somehow felt real. I stared at them, and for a moment I could feel them. Not the living, not exactly, but the echo of their existence. A weight in the air, in the paper, in the way the folder trembled slightly under my fingers. I called dispatch. The reports didn't exist in the system. None of them. Not one. I double-checked every database, every entry, every record. The deaths were confirmed. The filings were impossible. And yet, there was a folder. Pale, cold, undeniable. For the rest of the night, I couldn't stop thinking about him, about the way he moved, about the emptiness behind his eyes, about the names he brought with him, names that were gone from this world but alive in that folder. By morning, I was exhausted. My hands trembled as I wrote my shift report. I didn't mention the man, didn't mention the folder, didn't mention the names. How could I explain him? How could I explain the impossible? But I knew he would return. I had a feeling, deep and quiet, like the hum of the fluorescent lights, that he would be back. And when he did, I would have to listen, because some people or some things are meant to witness the dead, and he was one of them. And I was trapped here, forced to watch too. The folder wasn't supposed to exist. I knew that the moment I picked it up, after man with the pale skin vanished, leaving behind a stack of impossible reports. I thought maybe it was a one-time thing, a strange occurrence I could rationalize, or at least push into some distant corner of my memory. I was wrong. I was alone in the station, the hum of the fluorescent lights filling the spaces between my thoughts. The night shift had been quiet up to that point, almost too quiet, and I found myself going over the folder again, not wanting to, but unable to stop. Every name, every date, every death familiar in some way, but distant, like echoes I could almost touch. I set the folder down on the counter, rubbing my eyes, trying to wake up from what I hoped was a bad dream. And then I saw it. I froze, hands gripping the edge of the counter, so tightly my knuckles burned. My name was on the report, clear as the morning sun through the blinds. Sheriff name marked as missing. Report filed yesterday. By him. By that impossible, pale man who wasn't human. It didn't feel real at first. I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe my exhaustion was playing tricks on me. I leaned closer, eyes scanning the words again and again. The file number, the time, the date, it all matched. Everything was accurate, and yet it couldn't be. Not me, not here. A cold sweat ran down my back. My stomach dropped into my boots. Every rational thought I had, every law I believed in, every rule about reality and procedure, it all screamed at me to throw the folder across the room, to rip it to pieces, to burn it, anything to get it away from me. But I couldn't. I was rooted to the spot, unable to tear my eyes from the words that spelled out my own disappearance. I remember thinking, I've been doing this job too long to be scared by paperwork. But this wasn't just paperwork. This was something else. Something that knew me. Something that had been watching. I flipped the folder open. Inside, it wasn't just my name. It was details. My last patrol. My usual routes. Notes about my habits. The night I went to check on the old service road. The time I paused at the cemetery gate. Every movement I had made in the last month was documented, as if someone had been following me. Not someone. Something. The hair on my arm stood straight up. I reached the phone to call dispatch, to tell them, to make them see the impossible. But my hand froze midair. I realized, even before I picked it up, that the lines would be dead. Static, weak whispers. Just like that first night, when the pale man's presence lingered in the air. I didn't need to check. I knew. I sat down in the chair, head in my hands, and tried to remember how long this had been happening. How long had I been watched? How long had he, or it, been here, filing these reports, keeping track of us all, cataloging lives as if we were specimens in some unending record? I thought back to the first folder he left behind. The names were just names then. Impossible, sure, but not personal. Not like this. Now it was me. Now the terror was immediate, direct. I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears. My stomach twisted into knots. I tried to breathe slowly, deliberately, reminded myself that I was a sheriff, that I knew procedure, that I had authority, that none of this should scare me. But it did, and it still does. The details in the file weren't random. Someone or something had recorded every shift, every walk, every late-night check-in I had made. They had waited, patiently, and now, the culmination of all that waiting was staring me in the face. My own name listed as missing. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, hoping it would clear my mind. The lights flickered. The shadows along the walls seemed to grow, stretching toward me. I felt them inch closer. My skin crawled. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But where would I go? Even if I left the station, even if I got in my car, even if I called someone, the folder was still there. My fate had already been documented. My existence recorded, as though I were no longer living it myself. I thought about the reports of the other dead. The pale man had kept them alive in memory, in bureaucracy, in some impossible limbo. Was that what was happening to me now? Was I already in his ledger, already a part of that catalog? A phantom among the files, waiting for someone to notice? I couldn't think straight. I rubbed my face, staring at the folder like it might answer me, like it might blink or speak. And for a moment, I thought I saw a movement in the paper, a shimmer, a shift, just enough to make me swear the words rearranged themselves when I blinked. I tried to close it, tried to shove it into a drawer, but it was heavier than it should be, cold, unnerving, like it resisted containment. My hands shook. My legs trembled. I felt a hollowness open up inside me, and I realized that I had never felt fear like this. Not real fear. Not the kind that roots you to the spot, that freezes your lungs, that presses your chest into the chair like you can't move at all. I had been afraid of the dead before, of accidents, of violence. But this was something else. Something alive in the stillness. Something patient, watching, waiting. And it wasn't just a folder. I could hear the faintest shift behind me, a sound that was almost air, almost breath, almost movement. I spun around, expecting to see him, the pale man, the shadow, but the office was empty. The hall outside was empty. The echoes of my own footsteps filled the space. I laughed then, quietly, bitterly, because what else could I do? Who would believe me? If I called anyone and told them the story, they'd think I was losing it. Sleep deprivation, stress, too many late-night patrols. But I wasn't imagining this. Not entirely. I could feel it. I could feel him, or it, somewhere in the walls, somewhere beyond the ceiling, somewhere in the empty parking lot, cataloging my life like it had cataloged all the others. I returned to the folder, opened it again. The description of me was precise. Even my thoughts, my usual routines. And then I saw a line I hadn't noticed before. Subject is aware of observation. Reaction, unknown. Continue monitoring. I shivered. My spine prickled with every word. Not just a record, but an acknowledgement. It knew I could see it, knew I could feel it, and it was still patient, waiting. I couldn't stay there. I had to move. I picked up the folder, feeling the unnatural cold seep into my skin, and stuffed it into my coat. I grabbed my keys, my flashlight, my radio, anything that could make me feel safe in some small way. As I stepped out into the night, the lights of the station casting long, distorted shadows across the lot, I glanced back once. The windows of the office were dark, empty, but I felt it, watching, patient, unblinking. waiting for me to step out of the light, waiting to catalog me completely. I try to drive away. I try to convince myself that once I left, once I put distance between me and that office, I'd be safe. But the folder stayed with me, and I knew, deep in my chest, that it wasn't just paper. It wasn't just records. It was a tether, a marker, a claim, and it had my name written clearly, irrevocably, in letters I couldn't ignore. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after. Every sound in the car, every shadow in the rearview mirror made me flinch. I checked the rear lot at the station 3 times before I left, certain I'd see that pale figure standing there, waiting, his head cocked like he knew something I didn't. I keep the folder with me now, hidden under my bed, in my locker, in the glove compartment. Wherever I go, it's near, not just because I need proof, but because I can feel it. I can feel in the edges of the paper, in the way the shadows move when I enter a room, in the way the fluorescent lights hum a different tune when I'm alone. And every night, I hear the whisper of my own name in the static, quiet and deliberate, like a reminder I'm already gone, not in body, not yet, but in record, in memory, in that impossible ledger of the pale man who never forgets. I used to think I was alone on night shift. I was wrong. I never was. And now I'm listed, missing. The call came just after midnight, the kind that makes your stomach tighten even before you answer. A report of an abandoned car on Highway 82, right at the curve where the trees lean over the asphalt and the fog seems permanent. A civilian had spotted it, headlights cutting through the mist, but when they slowed down, the car was empty. No driver, no passengers, just a vehicle parked haphazardly on the shoulder. I shouldn't have been alone on that stretch of road, not at this hour, but it was quiet, too quiet. My cruiser hummed under me as I drove, the radio crackling faintly with the usual static and chatter that never seemed important until you needed it. I kept my hand on the wheel, eyes scanning the edge of the fog where the tree line met the asphalt. There's something about rural highways at night, the kind of place that feels like it could swallow you whole if you weren't paying attention. I reached the location. The car was exactly where they said, a dark sedan, its windows fogged, doors locked. The headlights glowed faintly in the mist, as if it were watching me. I pulled over, cut the engine, and grabbed my flashlight. I approached slowly. Every step on the gravel made my chest tighten. I shined the beam inside the windows. Empty. Nothing unusual at first glance. But there was something off. The seats looked used, like someone had been there recently. And the interior smelled wrong. Not just old leather, but something acrid, like burnt paper mixed with cold earth. I circled the car, checked the tires, the doors, the license plate. Nothing. No registration alert, no stolen report, nothing out of the ordinary. But my gut told me otherwise. It's funny how a single instinct to make the hair on your arms rise when nothing in your eyes confirms it. Then I noticed the back seat. Something moved. Just a shadow. I froze. I told myself it was a trick of the light, the fog, the reflection of my flashlight bouncing off the windows. My heartbeat echoed in my ears as I crouched slightly, shining the light directly inside. Nothing. And then, I swear I saw a hand, pale, resting on the edge of the seat, like it had been waiting for me. I yanked the flashlight back, breathing fast, trying to convince myself it wasn't real. But the sense of being watched didn't leave. I circled back to the driver's side, flashlight trembling in my hand. I checked under the seats, in the glove compartment, the center console, empty. I leaned against the hood, hands shaking, trying to tell myself it's just an abandoned car, that someone left it here and walked away. Maybe they ran off somewhere. Maybe they were hiding, in the woods. Maybe they just had car trouble and wandered off to get help. Rational thoughts, safe thoughts. But then I heard it, a faint noise, almost imperceptible over the hum of the highway, a soft scraping, like nails dragging along metal. My head snapped toward the back window. The shadow was gone, the hand, the movement, everything normal again. I swallowed hard, tried to shake it off. My flashlight flickered, just a battery issue. I told myself. My hands were slick with sweat as I tapped it, and that's when I heard breathing. Slow, heavy, behind me. I spun around. Nothing. Just a fog, curling between the trees like smoke from a distant fire. My heart pounded in my chest. My own breath came out in short, sharp bursts. I told myself it was the wind. That's all it had to be. I bent down to check the rear tires and headlights again. Footsteps crunched behind me. Soft, deliberate, following my movements. I froze. Hello? My voice cracked, swallowed by the fog. No answer. I straightened. Flashlight sweeping the shoulder and tree line. Nothing. And yet, the feeling of eyes on me didn't fade. I could almost hear the shadow moving behind the fog, circling me, watching, waiting. I turned back to the car. Nothing had changed. The back door was still shut, windows fogged, interior silent. And yet, I could feel the weight of something inside, pressing patient. I tapped the roof, hard, empty. You're empty, I whispered to myself, voice shaking. And then I saw it again, movement in the back seat. Not a hand this time, a form, taller than any person could fit comfortably in that vehicle. Been in the wrong places, limbs that seemed too long, shadows folding in ways that didn't make sense. It didn't move like a person, but like something studying me, testing me, waiting to see what I would do. I stumbled back, heart hammering, flashlight beam dancing across the fog. I couldn't tell if I wanted to run or confront it. Part of me, some deep instinct, told me to stand my ground, call it out, but rational thought was gone. All that remained was a single thought. Don't let it see fear. Don't let it know you're afraid. I took a deep breath. Step by step, I walked around to the other side of the car, flashlight never leaving the interior. The fog swirled, curling around me, hiding and revealing shapes in equal measure. And in that moment, I realized something I didn't want to admit. I wasn't alone. The air felt thick like it had mass, pressing against my chest. My own footsteps sounded louder than they should, echoing down the quiet stretch of highway. And the car seemed to breathe along with me. I grabbed the door handle again. Empty, cold, normal. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that was a lie. That the shadow inside, whatever it was, could vanish and appear at will, existing in the space just beyond perception. I stepped back, considering calling it in. Maybe another unit could check it out. Maybe I could rationalize this if someone else saw it. But the radio was dead. Static. Then a whisper low, almost indecipherable, just behind the hum of static. Don't move. I froze, tried to turn around, but nothing was there. Just the car. Just me. I knew I should leave. I knew I should drive back to the station, file a report, call for backup, but part of me couldn't. Something about the place demanded I stay, demanded I face what shouldn't exist. Another movement, the shadow again. Now sitting upright, impossible, almost human. The fog shifted with it. I could feel the eyes before I saw them. Empty, dark, unblinking. And I realized in that moment that it wasn't a trick of light. It wasn't fatigue. It wasn't imagination. Something was inside that car, watching me, studying me, waiting. I stumbled back, hand on the roof, pulling myself away. My flashlight beam fell across the empty shoulder, across the dark tree line, but the shadow remained. Not moving, just being, breathing, patient, calculating. I took another step. Footsteps in the gravel echoed behind me. Not mine. I ran. I didn't look back. Not once. The sound of my own boots, the wind through the trees, the mist curling around me like hands trying to pull me back. It didn't matter. I ran until the trees thinned, until the fog lifted just enough to see the curve of the road ahead. My cruiser's lights glimmered in the distance. Safety, or at least what I hoped was safety. When I got back to the vehicle, doors locked, engine running, I checked the back seat. Empty. Just the empty car I had left minutes ago. But I knew better. I could feel it. The shadow was patient, waiting for the next patrol, the next chance, watching, always. I drove back in silence, radio still crackling with static, the road empty, the fog thick. Every mile felt like hours. I couldn't shake the image from my mind. Tall, impossible, bent in ways no human could exist, just sitting there in the back seat, waiting. And I knew, somehow, that it would be there again, next week, next month, for every abandoned car, every lonely patrol, every night that stretched long and empty into the dark. I didn't sleep for the rest of my shift. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it. Every time I opened them, I felt it. The shadow isn't gone. Not ever. It doesn't need to be. It only needs me to know it's there. And that, somehow, is enough. I drove slowly. Headlights cut into the thick fog that had rolled in like a living thing over the back roads. My mind was still spinning from the abandoned car earlier. I couldn't shake it. That shadow, those impossible movements, the way it seemed to know I was there before I even saw it. I told myself I imagined it, that my mind was playing tricks on me after long hours alone on patrol. But deep down I knew better. The road was empty, quiet, too quiet. Even the night birds had stopped calling. Every now and then, a branch would scrape against a cruiser, and I would jerk, heart hammering. I tried to focus on the radio, tuning the static, hoping for a voice, anything normal, but there was nothing, just the hum of the engine, the faint whisper of the wind, and that gnawing sense that I wasn't alone. I adjusted the rear view mirror, catching the faint reflection of the back seat. That's when I saw it. A shape. It wasn't solid, not completely. Just a dark blur, sitting there, slouched, still almost casual. My breath hitched. My hand froze on the wheel. I blinked and it was gone. I told myself it was a fog, a trick of the dim light reflecting off the seats. But the hair on my arm stood on end. My pulse was a drumbeat in my ears. I turned my head slowly, eyes sweeping the interior. Empty. The back seat was empty. Just a worn fabric. The seatbelt dangling. The faint smell of leather and damp upholstery. I forced a laugh, sharp and short. "Get together, man," I whispered to myself. But the words sounded hollow. Minutes later, I glanced up again, and there it was, closer this time. I didn't move my head, didn't want to acknowledge it, but my peripheral vision caught it in the mirror. Tall, dark, not quite human. Just sitting there, watching, waiting. I could feel it even without looking. That same impossible presence, patient, precise. I yanked the rear view mirror down and leaned forward, flashlight flicking across the seat. Empty. My hands were trembling now, gripping the wheel like it would keep me grounded. I tried, rationalizing it. Maybe a branch or shadow outside the window. Maybe a deer reflected in the fog. But something deep inside me whispered, "No, you know better." I kept driving, slowly, deliberately, eyes flicking between the road ahead and the mirror. The shadow didn't reappear at first. I began to relax slightly, telling myself the first sighting was a fluke, a trick of fatigue, of long hours alone. Then I saw it again. This time it moved, not quickly, not like a person walking, but in sharp, precise motions, stretching and bending in ways no human could. Its head tilted unnaturally, as if examining me. I could feel its gaze on me, crawling along my spine like a living thing. I slammed my hand down on the horn. Nothing. The shadow didn't flinch, didn't vanish. It was still there, still watching. I flicked the lights, locked eyes with the mirror, willing it to disappear. And then it did. Gone. My heart hammered. My hands shook. I pulled over to the shoulder, trying to calm myself. I leaned back, inhaling slowly, counting in my head. 1, 2, 3. The mist rolled over the cruiser, thick and suffocating. I turned to glance back again, half expecting the figure to be standing behind me, leaning on the glass. Empty. Just a seat. Just the leather. I muttered to myself, "Try and make sense of it. It's nothing. Just shadows. Just fog. You're fine." But I wasn't fine. I started driving again, slower this time, eyes constantly scanning the interior. The further I went, the heavier the air felt, pressing in through the vents. Every time I dared to look in the mirror, I felt it, that patient awareness, like something was counting my breaths, noting every blink. I turned onto a narrow road, the headlights barely cutting through the fog. My chest ached with tension. Every noise, the crunch of gravel under tires, the whistle of the wind, the snap of a branch, made me jerk. My nerves were frayed, raw. And then I saw in the mirror again, not at first glance. A flicker, a shadow just behind the passenger seat, taller than it should be, stretched out in ways that made no sense. Its form wasn't solid, more like darkness pulled into a shape, bending the light around it. I swallowed hard. My hands gripped the wheel until my knuckles went white. I couldn't look at it directly. I had to. Slowly, I raised the flashlight. I swept the beam across the back seat. Empty. My breath caught. My heart felt lodged in my throat. And then a whisper. I froze. Soft. Just behind my ear, almost part of the wind. A voice rasping, low. Don't move. I swung the flashlight wildly. Nothing. Just the mist curling past windows. The dark trees looming at the road's edge. My pulse raced, my mind spinning. I told myself to calm down, that I just went on edge too long, that fatigue was making my imagination run wild. But I knew that wasn't true. There was something in the back seat. I sensed it. I couldn't explain it, couldn't rationalize it. But I knew I wasn't alone. I kept driving, tense, shoulders tight. Every glance in the mirror made my stomach churn. Every flicker of darkness in the seat was enough to make me freeze. My mind kept filling in details. What it wanted, why it was here, how long it had been watching. I remembered the old stories from veterans on the force. Sometimes things follow you. One had said, not alive, not dead, just aware, just patient. I laughed bitterly, but my chest tightened. Maybe those stories weren't warnings. They were confessions. The shadow's movements were deliberate, almost mocking. Every time I slowed down or blinked, it seemed to shift, always staying just beyond the edge of my vision. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I turned completely, it would vanish, always disappearing when I looked directly, but always there, waiting, watching. I tried the radio. Static, nothing, no reassurance, no voice, just empty, crackling air, like the world itself had paused to watch me struggle with the invisible presence behind me. The road seemed endless. Trees bent over, blocking the faint light from the moon. The fog wrapped around the cruiser, like fingers. I could hear nothing, no footsteps, no breathing, nothing except my own racing heart. But I felt it. The shadow followed, mimicked, studied, always patient. I slowed near a curve, one hand shaking as I adjusted the mirror. And there it was again, head tilting unnaturally, just slightly, as if inspecting me, judging my reactions. Its form stretched, twisted in impossible ways. My stomach turned. My lungs burned. My mind screamed at me to drive faster, to get away. But my body moved as if in molasses. I finally reached the next intersection, the fog thinning slightly. I blinked and the shadow disappeared. Just gone. For now. I exhaled, shakily, hands still trembling. I couldn't stop glancing in the mirror, couldn't stop feeling its absence as loudly as its presence. I told myself it was over, that it had vanished, but I knew better. The back seat was never truly empty. Not really. It had waited. It had watched. And it would wait again for the next patrol, the next lonely hour, the next careless blink. I drove the rest of my shift in silence, barely daring to breathe. Every time I glanced in the mirror, I half expected the impossible shape to be sitting there again, waiting, patient. And I knew, as much as I wanted to forget, as much as I wanted to believe I was alone, that it wouldn't let me. Because once it knows you, once it finds you, it doesn't leave. Not ever. The cruiser sputtered, coughed, and then went completely silent. No engine hum, no lights flickering, just the sudden, suffocating emptiness of the back road at 2 a.m. My chest tightened instantly. I hit the ignition again. Nothing. Turned the key over and over until my fingers were raw. Knuckles white. The fog rolled in thick now, curling around the tires like smoke from a fire I couldn't see. I cursed under my breath and stepped out into the cold. The air was heavy, wet, clinging to my skin. Headlights cut through the mist in 2 sharp cones, illuminating nothing but the endless black of the forest on either side. My hand lingered on the car, trying to convince myself that everything was normal, that it was just a mechanical failure, just bad timing. I knew better. I always knew better. The silence wasn't empty. Not really. There was a presence here. Somewhere just beyond the reach of my eyes. I could feel it brushing against the back of my neck, a pressure that didn't move but pressed, like the night itself was alive and leaning in. I started walking. Slowly at first, boots crunching in the gravel. I didn't have a choice. The nearest station was miles away, and I was alone. Every step felt heavier than the last, like the road was trying to swallow me, trying to keep me there. I kept glancing over my shoulder. The fog didn't just hang around the trees. It moved, curling, swirling, always hiding something just out of reach. The first time I heard it, I froze. Footsteps, soft, deliberate, echoing behind me, perfectly in rhythm with mine. I spun around. Empty road. Nothing. Just mist curling over the gravel. The dark trees bowing like watchers. My heartbeat spiked. I called out, "Hello? Anyone there?" My own voice sounded foreign in the silence, loud and brittle. No answer. I told myself I was imagining it, that my mind was fraying after all these hours of night patrols, the long stretches of emptiness. But the steps didn't lie. They were real. I quickened my pace, trying to outdistance them, trying to convince myself I was alone. But the footsteps matched me step for step, never louder, never softer, never falling behind. Every time I dared to glance over my shoulder, nothing, just shadows, just fog, just a suggestion of movement in the darkness that made my stomach twist. I cursed, shaking my head, muttering to myself, "It's nothing, just your imagination. You're fine, you're fine." But the words rang hollow, empty. My breath came in short bursts, steam curling from my mouth, ghosting in the fog. I started to notice the details I hadn't before. The way the mist hung in clumps around certain trees, thick and heavy, darker than the rest. The way the air seemed to press down on me, hard enough that each breath felt like pulling from water. The silence wasn't natural. It was orchestrated. It was waiting for something, waiting for me to slip, waiting for me to stop. Every so often, I'd see shapes dart in the fog, just at the edge of vision. Branches swayed, leaves rustled, but no wind. Nothing natural. I tried to focus on the road, on counting steps, anything to anchor myself. But my mind kept wandering, conjuring shapes in the darkness, whispering voices that didn't exist. And then I heard it, not footsteps, not wind. A whisper, low, deliberate, just behind me. It didn't speak words, just a breath, a hiss, like air moving through teeth. I froze, every nerve on fire, sweat prickling my back. I spun around. Nothing, just fog, rolling, shifting, almost alive. I started walking again, faster this time, boots crunching, heart hammering. The road seemed to stretch endlessly, a black ribbon under the yellow glow of the cruiser's deadlights. Every tree leaned in, their branches grasping at me, clawing, reaching. Shadows flickered at the edges of vision, shapes bent in ways that didn't make sense. And always just behind, the faint echo of steps, keeping pace. I wanted to run, but my legs felt leaden. My pack was heavy on my shoulders, the weight of the radio, flashlight, keys, everything. But it wasn't the pack that slowed me. It was the road, the fog, the presence. I could feel it now, not just behind me, but all around, pressing in from the trees, the mist, the darkness itself. I thought of my cruiser, useless and dark a few hundred yards behind me. It should have been a safe point, a beacon, but even it felt wrong now, swallowed by the fog, distant, unreachable. I wanted to scream, to call for backup, but the sound caught in my throat. My voice sounded weak, ridiculous, swallowed by the night. Another whisper, closer. I couldn't make it words, but it felt personal, intimate, like it knew my name, my thoughts, my fears. I quickened my pace, boots slapping the wet gravel, hard in my throat. The whisper followed, circling, teasing. I stumbled on a root, swearing, falling hard. Gravel bit into my palms. My flashlight rolled into the fog, the beam cutting a thin line into the mist. And then I saw it, a figure, tall, shapeless, yet impossibly rigid, standing just at the edge of the fog. No face, no features I could make sense of, just a darkness, a form stretching up, bending light around it like it didn't belong here. It didn't move, didn't blink, but I felt its eyes on me, heavy and patient. I scrambled up, snatched my flashlight, swinging it wildly. Nothing, just fog curling around the trees. My breaths came fast now, ragged. My pulse was a drumbeat. Every instinct screamed to run. But every step forward felt like swimming through molasses, like the road itself resisted my movement. The figure shifted, just slightly, almost imperceptibly. But it was enough. My stomach dropped. I could hear it now. Not footsteps, not whispers. Something heavier, moving with me, echoing my rhythm. I couldn't escape it. I tried calling dispatch on the radio. Static. Nothing. The fog swallowed my voice. I tried again. Still nothing. I realized with cold clarity that no one could hear me. Not now. Not ever. I kept walking, forced myself forward, forcing each step, feeling the presence keeping pace, always patient, always just behind, just out of sight. Trees leaned, branches scraped, shadows flickered. Every so often, I dared to glance over my shoulder. Nothing, always nothing. But I knew better. Hours, or maybe minutes. Time had no meaning here. I kept moving. The forest stretched endlessly. The road wound, twisted, looping impossibly back on itself. I felt trapped in a loop, every familiar bend now alien, the fog thicker, heavier. The whispers became voices, faint but insistent, indistinct syllables, half-formed words, urging, mocking, telling me I shouldn't have come here. I shook my head, pressed forward, but the voices followed. They didn't speak to be heard. They spoke to be felt, to make me question every step, every breath, every heartbeat. I thought of turning back, to the cruiser, but I knew it would vanish, like it had never been there. The presence would wait. It would follow. It would never let me go. The road began to thin, the fog lighter, the night not so heavy. I stumbled onto a paved road, the streetlight ahead flickering weakly. Relief rushed through me, sharp and fleeting. I glanced back one last time. Nothing, and yet I felt it, patient, waiting. Somewhere in the fog, somewhere in the dark, it had not moved. It would not move, not until I stopped walking, not until I was weak, not until it had decided it was finished. I walked the rest of the way in silence, never daring to look back, never daring to stop. Every shadow, every movement at the edge of vision made my chest tighten. I knew what followed me now was not human, not alive, not dead, not something I could reason with. The memory of that road, that long, endless walk, will never leave me. The sound of footsteps just behind me, always keeping pace, will never leave me. The feeling of being watched, studied, hunted, that stays, even in the bright light of day. I reached the station as the sun began to rise. Exhausted, shaking, soaked with sweat and cold. The fog had lifted. The road was normal, nothing out of place. But I knew it was still there, waiting, patient, like the dark itself had learned my name. And I knew, no matter how many miles I walked, how many days I patrolled, how far I ran, it would always be behind me, just beyond sight, keeping pace, counting my steps, never leaving. Night fell faster than I expected. The road stretched on, endless and black, swallowing everything around it, the trees, the fog, the familiar landmarks. My cruiser's headlights barely cut through the darkness, leaving shadows to crawl and twist at the edges of my vision. The long walk back had left me raw, nerves stretched tight, senses screaming. Every crackle of gravel, every whisper wind felt like it could be something alive, something waiting. I kept moving, flashlight shaking in one hand, keys digging into my other palm. My own breathing sounded like thunder in the empty night. I tried to tell myself it was just exhaustion, that the shadows were tricks, my mind inventing movement where there was none. But I knew better. I always knew better. The first time I saw it, I didn't recognize it as a figure, just a shape, a distortion at the very edge of vision. My eyes snapped to it, and it vanished, gone before I could confer it was real. I shook my head violently. I wasn't going crazy. I wasn't. I took another step, and there it was again, just beyond the reach of my flashlight beam, leaning out from the black of the roadside trees. Impossibly tall, impossibly still. Its form didn't make sense, like a shadow wrapped around itself, bending light, moving with the fog rather than against it. And yet it was there. I stopped dead in my tracks. My hands were slick with sweat, heart hammering in my ears. The darkness pressed in from all sides, thick and wet, as if the night itself was alive and breathing around me. Who's there? My voice cracked on a word. It felt small, meaningless in the emptiness. The only response was the sound of the asphalt under my boots, the soft scraping of gravel. Not behind me, not in the usual way, but all around. I realized then that I couldn't outrun it. No matter how far I went, the presence was already there, waiting at the edge, patient beyond reason. I took another step, and the shape flickered again. It wasn't walking toward me. It didn't need to. It simply existed just beyond the edge of sight, and that was enough. The hair on my neck rose. I forced my flashlight higher, swinging the beam in wide arcs, trying to catch a better look. The mist clung to the trees, curling around the figure, making it impossible to see fully. My stomach clenched. I wanted to turn back, to run, but the road behind me was empty, swallowed by darkness. The safety of the station was still miles away, and even there, I knew it would follow. I tried to focus on details. Anything normal. The yellow lines of the highway stretched out under the beam of my flashlight. The fog rolling low over the asphalt. Nothing else moved. Nothing breathed. And yet I felt it, the weight of it, pressing against the edges of my mind, forcing my thoughts inward, making me doubt every sound, every shadow. Another flicker, another brush of movement at the edge of my vision. I froze. My chest ached with tension. I realized the figure didn't step forward. It didn't need to. Its presence warped the air, bending the darkness around it. I could feel it, not just behind me or beside me, but in front of me too, stretching across the road like a living shadow. I whispered to myself, trying to keep calm. It's just a shadow, just a trick. You're fine. But the words were hollow, swallowed immediately by the night. My flashlight flickered, and for a moment, the shape seemed to stretch, leaning in, bending toward me. My breath caught. Something in the distance shifted. Just a movement too quick, too smooth to be human. My instinct screamed at me, warning, telling me to run, but my feet felt rooted to the asphalt. I could feel the darkness behind it, following, stretching, patient. I started moving again, careful steps, trying not to run, not wanting to provoke it. The figure stayed just beyond sight, always at the periphery, bending the edges of vision, warping shadows in impossible ways. It mimicked my own movements, perfectly in time, but never fully visible. I felt my stomach churn. It was learning me, counting steps, memorizing patterns. Every so often, a flash of detail would strike me. Long, spindly limbs bent unnaturally, a torso that seemed to shift with the fog, a head that hovered too high, tilted at angles no human could survive. I tried to force rational thought, tried to anchor myself to reality, but the presence ignored reason. It existed on rules I could not comprehend. I glanced at the trees again, noticing how the fog curled differently around them here, heavy and tense. Shadows clung to the trunks in ways they shouldn't, brushing at the asphalt, stretching like fingers. I knew then that the figure wasn't alone. It was part of the darkness, a piece of the night itself made sentient. The whispering started again, low, almost inaudible, like wind through a cracked window. I strained to hear, but the words were gone as soon as they touched my mind. My own thoughts echoed back at me, disjointed, fractured. Fear pulled in my stomach, thick and bitter. I forced myself forward, step by step, gripping the flashlight until my knuckles ached. I dared not look back, dared not let my eyes linger on the darkness behind me. But the periphery, the corner of my vision, kept telling me it was there, always there, waiting, patient. The asphalt stretched endlessly, the yellow lines melting into fog. I tried to call dispatch again, but the radio was dead. No static, no voice, no reassurance. Just silence. I realized with a cold certainty that I was entirely alone. The night belonged to the figure, to the darkness, and I was trespassing. Another flicker at the edge of sight. Taller now, leaning closer. The night itself seemed to pulse around it. I could feel the cold radiating. A presence not just watching, but knowing, probing the fragile line between thought and fear. I stumbled, cursed under my breath, gripping the flashlight tighter. The beam caught something, just for a moment. An impossible angle of limbs. A shadow where no shadow should be. My chest tightened. My legs shook. I wanted to scream, to run, to throw myself into the fog, and hope I could disappear. But the road was empty, endless, unyielding. I pressed forward, one foot after the other, counting steps silently, trying to stay grounded. But the steps weren't my own anymore. I could hear them behind me, faint, perfectly in rhythm. I didn't dare glance back. I knew what waited there. The whispering grew louder, almost mocking, low, deliberate, brushing my ears like cold breath. I shook my head violently, trying to dislodge it, trying to force reality back into place. But reality had left. The night had claimed it. The figure existed in a space I couldn't touch, couldn't reason with, couldn't escape. I finally reached the first hint of streetlights, dim and flickering ahead. Relief surged, sharp and fleeting. The figure didn't vanish. It didn't move into the shadows. It stayed just at the edge, bending the fog, waiting, patient, unfathomable. I stumbled toward the lights, towards a fragile safety of civilization, heart hammering, lungs burning. Every instinct screamed at me to keep moving, never look back, never pause. But I could feel it still, following, not running, not chasing, just keeping pace, bending the edges of the world to its will. When I finally reached the station, bathed in harsh artificial light, the fog seemed to dissolve. The road behind me was empty, normal, safe, but I knew better. The figure, the presence, the darkness itself, whatever it was, had not left, not truly. It would wait, patiently, at the edge of vision, in every shadow, always watching, always following. And I knew, no matter how far I walked, how many patrols I ran, how many sunrises came, it would remain, waiting, patient, never fully visible, but always there, just beyond the reach of light, just at the edge of my perception. And that thought, heavier than the night itself, will never leave me.